Good morning and welcome to our November 28, 2022 strategic planning meeting. It is 9 o'clock. Let the record reflect that all three commissioners are present and our executive management team. We are starting off with Larry Crowder from the airport. I'll let you introduce your guest and let you go ahead and start your briefing.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, county team. I'm with Amy Anderson this morning. Amy is our manager of properties and contracts, and Amy has been the primary point of contact for this item that we're going to cover with the commissioners today. And I want to thank Ron Valencia for helping us out on the presentation. This matter is a land acquisition item for 11208 West Electric Avenue. It's about 3.42 acres of property, and it is located near the approach end of runway 3 at Spokane International Airport. Next slide, please, Ron. We'll cover some of the details before we go to the location. Just want to point out to the commissioners that this property owner actually reached out to us and asked us if we would be interested in acquiring her property. She's elderly and getting ready to relocate with family. Typically in those situations, as long as the acquisition is consistent with our efforts to achieve compatible land use, either approach protection or noise compatibility, we will make that offer as long as airport funds are available. In this case, you can see the details with the property and a little bit of the timeline of when we worked with Ms. Atchison to secure her approval of the fair market value of $320,000. Next slide, please. These are a bit of an eye test if you're looking at the screen, but the property, as you can see, with the star is in the approach end on the lower left to runway 3, which is our primary instrument runway. So it is the runway that has the most use and the runway that has the highest amount of precision approaches in terms of the airspace. And then you can also see in the upper right the property, the residential dwelling units on the property, as well as the relationship of the property to the surrounding land. And I'll also point out that this parcel is directly adjacent to property that the airport already owns.
So just for clarity purposes, where the star is at on the aerial is not where the property is at.
It's a little bit off.
Property's actually across the street.
It's a little bit to the east, I think, up there.
You get a better view of it on the next drawing.
Yeah, I'm glad I had backup drawings.
Yeah.
So I got it a little bit better as we went forward, showing it with regard to the airport compatibility zones. So that's the next slide. Ron, if I could have the next slide, please. So here you can get a much better sense of where it's located, particularly with regard to the airport compatibility zones. You can see that it's right outside of ACZ 3 and inside of ACZ 5, and kind of located between the existing and then the future parallel runway that we have on the approved airport layout plan. Next slide, please. And again, here's a better view of the property. You can see it's kind of a long and narrow lot, and again, we own all of the property directly adjacent to the property on the west side. Next slide, please. Again, just one more look, zooming back out in terms of the airport compatibility zones to give you a better sense of where that's at. And then finally, one more slide after this, I think, just to show you which is the airport compatibility zones, but also the noise zone, the noise exposure area. You can see that it's located well within the noise exposure area, where residential use is not recommended. So the action that we are requesting the commissioners to consider this morning is to approve the joint resolution authorizing the purchase and sale agreement with Kelly and Elizabeth Atchison for the acquisition of 3.42 acres. I'm not going to read the parcel number, but in the amount of $320,000. And just a program note for the commissioners, the City Council passed this on first reading last Monday, and it'll be voted on this evening as well. Happy to answer any questions.
I don't have our Tuesday agenda. So to say, on our Tuesday agenda.
It's on tomorrow's consent agenda, I believe. Yes.
Very good. Any questions for Larry? Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, commissioners.
For braving the weather as well, so.
No other questions? We'll take our leave. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's item 2F on tomorrow's consent agenda.
Okay. Very good. Julie, yes, we'll have you guys come over to the table.
2F? Mine doesn't have a 2F.
You don't have that, that's not it, that's for.
On the consent agenda.
It's
It's not in the stack.
yeah.
Oh,
Tomorrow's consent is.
Then I quit looking for it.
It's in our emails, we got it Friday.
Okay.
Welcome. So Julie and I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, but Julie, Lucy, and Chelsea.
Yeah,
Thank
so-
you very much for being here this morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Julie Holmkamp, and I'm the CEO at SNAP. And I'm happy to have here today Lucy Lipinski, our Chief Operating Officer, Chelsea, and I believe Aaron as well is with us. And they're here this morning to provide a little bit of an update on rental assistance.
All right, hello, my name is Chelsea Dunham. I am the program manager for rental assistance at SNAP. I've been with SNAP as a program manager since September of 2021, and I'm here today to present an overview of the rental assistance program for you all. And the next slide, please. So it started with Emergency Rental Assistance Program 1, which we call ERAP 1. It is, take a breath, I'm sorry. This program was set forth by the CARES Act, and it ran from October 2020 through June of 2021. The funds were expended in February of 2021. We worked with by and for organizations. Those are organizations that are operated by and for the community that they serve. And this program assisted with rent and utilities for approximately 2,506 households. And there is a correction on the bottom. It's approximately 5.6 million in direct assistance. This program could also help city or county residents. Next slide, please. The eligibility requirements for ERAP 1 were that the households must meet 2 initial screening criteria. Their income must be at or below 50% area median income, and at least 1 month of rent not paid or partially unpaid since March 1st of 2020. The households must also meet one of the following. They had to be rent burdened, previously homeless within the last 5 years, have an eviction history within the last 7 years. Their housing had to be disrupted due to a member's race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or religion, at risk of severe illness or disability of any household member. Next slide, please.
What did,
Go ahead.
I just said, what does that mean?
The
That their housing was disrupted due to member, race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion?
So that could be that their housing was disrupted due to, like, say, they were a gay couple living there and the owner didn't like them living there, so they kicked them out or something like that.
But you can't do that.
That's illegal.
HUD doesn't allow that.
Right, it is illegal, but sometimes it does happen even though it is illegal.
So are legal actions then taken against that landlord and?
Or a household would be coached to go talk with Northwest Fair Housing, right? I mean, that wouldn't be a step that we would take, is to initiate that action.
Okay, it just, okay.
And are these criteria set by HUD or set by the state, commerce, or who sets these criteria?
The funder for each one of these programs set the criteria. In some cases, it's the Department of Treasury, and in some cases, it's another government entity. Then it goes to the state. The state can add additional requirements, and then passes through to the county.
But it starts at the federal level then?
Yes,
Okay,
you can't do less than what they require.
okay. I guess where I was going is I wanted to make sure these weren't the criteria set by the city of Spokane, but they're set by some other entity that we have to account to.
Yes, the ERAP flowed through the county to
Right.
SNAP.
Right.
So the city was not involved in setting any of the requirements for this program.
Did the
Okay.
county add any requirements that weren't in the state or federal requirements?
I don't believe so, do you?
No, we do not.
Okay,
These would have been either Treasury, US Federal Treasury, or Commerce in most parts, in most cases. State Commerce.
Okay. All right, next slide, please. Now, the next few programs, many of the programs had similar eligibility requirements, so I'll point out the differences as I go. Next, we have the ERA 1, which this program was set forth by the U.S. Treasury Department from the Consolidated Appropriations Act. The program ran from February 2021 through June of 2022 and was spent out in March of 2022. This program could provide rent and utility assistance of up to 15 months. This program assisted approximately 1,261 households, and approximately $8.6 million was spent in direct assistance. Next slide, please. The eligibility requirements for ERA 1 was that the household must reside in Spokane County, excluding the city limits. The household income be at or below 80% area median income, and one or more individuals in the household has qualified for unemployment or has experienced a reduction in household income, incurred significant costs, or other financial hardship due directly or indirectly to the coronavirus outbreak. And that could be that the household had to miss work due to their child having to be quarantined, or they had to miss work themselves. And one or more individuals in the household could demonstrate a risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability, which could include a past due utility bill or unsafe or unhealthy living conditions. Next slide, please. TRAP 1 was Treasury Rental Assistance Program. This program was set forth by the CARES Act and Washington State Department of Commerce. This program ran from March 2021 through September 2022, and it could assist with up to 15 months of rent, utility, and other housing costs. Other housing costs could include move-in costs, which included deposits. SNAP worked with by and for partners such as Latinos in Spokane and Emmanuel Family Life Center. Direct assistance was approximately $10.1 million, and total households served was approximately 1,656 households. Next slide, please. And the requirements for TRAP 1 was that the household resided in Spokane County, excluding the city limits, income at or below 80% area median income, and experiencing a financial hardship directly or indirectly due to COVID that threaten the household's ability to pay the cost of the rental property or at risk of experiencing homelessness or currently experiencing homelessness. Next slide, please. TRAP 2.0 was Treasury Rental Assistance Program 2.0. This program was set forth by the American Rescue Plan Act. Program duration is October 2021 through December 2022. It can assist with up to 18 months of assistance for rent, utilities, other housing costs, and housing stability services. With the flexibility of this program, we could help households with a 30-day hotel stay and with their legal fees having to do with evictions. We could also help with past arrears at a residence a household was evicted from or no longer lived at and needed help to pay off that debt to get into a new place. This program ran from January 2022 through October, I already did that. From January 2022 through October 2022, approximate direct assistance served was 8.9 million and approximately 1,573 households served.
Was the 1,573 households served, the same population as the 1,656 in the previous? Or is that 1,500 of new applicants to the program?
So these are deduplicated, meaning that they are not, so these are just the households served with TRAP 2.0. They're not combined. So if a household got ERA and then came back for TRAP, we're counting them as one in ERA and one as TRAP for these figures.
Okay.
Next slide, please. The eligibility requirements for TRAP 2.0 are much like ERA and TRAP 1. The household would have to reside in Spokane County, excluding the city limits, income at or below 80% area median income. The difference here was that the household could be experiencing a financial hardship during COVID, not due to COVID. They could also be experiencing it due to COVID, and they would qualify. But they could, need surgery that had nothing to do with COVID, so they had to be off work for 6 weeks. And they had to be at risk of experiencing homelessness or currently experiencing homelessness. Next slide, please. ERA 2, Emergency Rental Assistance 2, is set forth by the U.S. Treasury Department from the American Rescue Plan Act. Program duration is March 2022 through August 2025. This funding can help with up to 18 months of rent and utility assistance. There is flexibility to help with other housing costs too. Up to October 2022, approximately 1.1 million has been expended on direct assistance and a total of 177 households so far. Next slide, please. And the eligibility requirements are much the same. Reside in Spokane County, excluding the city limits. Household must be at or below 80% AMI. One or more individuals in the household is qualified for unemployment benefits or has experienced a reduction in income. And the household demonstrates a risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability. This can include past due rent or a utility notice. Any rental assistance received must cover all arrearages due, not partial. So if a household owed 19 months of rent, ERA 2 would not be the program for them because it wouldn't cover all of their arrearages owed and wouldn't stabilize their household.
Just to clarify, that's the one that we're extending through June of 2023?
The next one. No, that is that one.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Correct. Next slide, please. All right, and the last program here is ERAP 2.0, Eviction Rent Assistance Program. This project is funded through the Washington State Department of Commerce and the American Rescue Plan Act. Program's duration is February 2021 through December 2022 currently. And this program can assist households with rent and utility assistance. There is no limit on the amount of rent or utilities that we can assist with, meaning if a household is behind 20 months of rent, we could assist with 20 months of rent. Through October 2022, approximately $3.8 million in direct assistance has been expended with a total of 496 households so far. This program also allows buy and for partners. Next slide, please. The eligibility requirements for ERAP were a bit different. The household must reside in Spokane County, excluding the city limits. The household must occupy the residence in which the household is seeking assistance, so no past arrears in this program. The household must have a missed or partially paid rent payment since March of 2020, and the income must be at or below 80% area median income. Next slide, please. And for all programs, SNAP has worked closely with the eviction resolution pilot programs to ensure that those households who are most at risk of being evicted get prioritization. Duplicative rent payments were not allowed for any of the programs, meaning that if a household received December 2020 rent, they could not reapply for that same month. Future months rent was allowable with all programs up to 3 months in future rent, and self-declarations were also allowed for all programs. Next slide, please. And these are some rental assistance averages. Average amount of rental assistance per household the last 6 months. the average duration, and the average amount of months. Next slide, please. And this slide is the number of households for all programs. So the first figure there is the number of households who received multiple rental assistance disbursement with 1,709 households. This means that they received a combination of rent and utilities and other housing costs, any combination of those. The next number is the number of households who received funding from multiple streams. That was 789 households. So this means a household who got assistance in ERA 1 and then still needed assistance may have gotten TRAP 2.0. And the last number there is the number of households receiving assistance since inception is 3,946 households. Next slide, please. And this is the number of applicants by month or households, as I like to call them. Households that receive 0 to 6 months of assistance is 1,000. Households that receive 6 to 12 months of assistance, 1,488. Households that receive 12 to 15 months is 418. And households that received 15 to 18 months of assistance is 338. Next one. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
So when you are counting households, are you counting by address or by applicant?
By the applicant, so it goes with the person who's applying.
So if you had a couple that was in a household and they were not married, one could apply for the rental assistance, exhaust that, then their partner could apply for rental assistance, exhaust that, so the two of them could apply for the same household. Is that accurate or not?
No.
Okay, what would prevent that from happening?
Because we gathered the information of each of the household members that's over 18, and then we put them together in the same household. And then that primary applicant is the one who receives the assistance under their name, but they're all in the household. So when we're looking up if they've applied again, we can see that, oh, okay, you've got Jane and Jim, they're in the same house together. So they can't now, Jane's getting this assistance, but it's assisting Jim as well. He couldn't then apply for more assistance.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So when you've got on the screen, it looks like the totals of how much, if you, dollar.
Yes, I was just, SNAP's done a really great job in dispersing these on behalf of Spokane County to the community as a whole. And what the Jared and team have done is taken information from SNAP and then displayed it in some infographic forms on the county website, so you can see a little bit more detail in terms of by location, how many different individuals or households by location, the Valley, Airway Heights, Cheney. It shows by 50, 80, 30% of AMI. It shows by program. So it just takes all the information that staff's been collecting and provides it back to the county for some more community-facing dashboards. Lucy, could you share, we discussed with our team a week or so ago, kind of dollars that are remaining, and you've got a number of applications in right now. Could you share with the commissioners kind of what the status of that looks like today and kind of timing of rest of the spend down?
We got a large uptick in the number of applications we were receiving per month towards the end of the summer, when we switched from an intake queue portal to utilizing our website and made the application less burdensome by only requiring 3 or 4 data points instead of the full application to be uploaded. So we had a very high increase in the number of applications per month. And because of that and processing time, we are going to close the wait list at the end of this month, the month of November, and work on processing the applications we have in place. We think we have enough applications on hand to utilize most of the remaining funding, if not all. And if there is the ability to reopen the wait list afterwards, to reopen the wait list, we will do so. But if we utilize all the funds, then we won't be reopening the wait list. But that is what's coming, and we're preparing information for everyone who has applied. So everyone who has applied that's waiting will get an email to let them know. We are also changing and prioritizing to those who have never received assistance before, or those that are at high risk of being evicted.
And we changed the limitation to 12 months, correct?
Yes.
So there's about a little over 10 million, so in excess of 10 million that's available right now that hasn't been provided out to the community, is that right? Right around that number?
8-ish, I think.
8-ish, okay.
Yeah.
And then of the applications you received in today, you believe there's, it's basically subscribing to all that's left of the $8 million. And so by closing it, it gives some clarity to those who've applied that we basically subscribed all of it, and there's not others that's available for that, and it gives you time then to process those things through and distribute them out to the community.
Right. We don't want to give landlords or applicants a false impression that if they apply, they're going to be served, because we do think we're going to utilize most of the funds with the remaining applications. We will still take applications from buy-in for agencies. They all have a subcontract with us, but none of them have big numbers of applications they can refer. The largest is like 250, and they've been referring. So we don't think that's going to have a huge impact. But leaving it open and getting 1,000 applications a month is not communicating effectively.
So as SNAP mentioned, they're working with the eviction rental the eviction rental resolution program. It's a lot of acronyms. To identify those who are already in that queue to try to prioritize them in applications. And then they're also looking across the remainder of applicants who have not received funding in the past, rental assistance in the past, to ensure the broadest sort of receipt of rental assistance across the community. So they're kind of going through and prioritizing those and trying to make sure that as many of our community who have needs who haven't maximized the 18 months or whatever, are able to get some of those access to the dollars.
So I believe the state, correct me if I'm wrong here, requires that the landlord and the tenant have to go through some kind of mediation process before disbursement can occur. Is that accurate, and is that just state funding, or is that also required of federal funding as well?
So I think with the eviction resolution pilot programs, what happens is they get an eviction notice, and then they have 14 days to call the number, and that's how they get set up with the ERPP programs. And then they set up the mediation between the landlord and the tenant, and then that goes to court, but it doesn't affect whether or not they're approved for the rental assistance.
Okay.
And correct me if I get this wrong, SNAP team, but they could be parallel efforts or completely independent of each other. If someone applies for rental assistance, they don't have to be in the ERR program. They can get rental assistance regardless. But if they are in the ERRP program, or the eviction rental eviction. Yeah, that acronym. If they're in that program, there is, as you mentioned, there are some requirements for mediation and days to respond, and they have to. The landlord has to give them awareness that there's rental assistance programs out there. But what SNAP is doing is a different track from that. As people are applying for rental assistance is distributed out regardless of whether they're in the eviction resolution program.
So from start to finish, what do you think you're averaging in terms of the the time somebody starts the process asking for assistance until they receive a check? What ballpark, what do you think that looks like? Couple months, couple years?
Not years, and it depends since the beginning, inception of the program to now. It just depended on how many applications we received and how much staffing we had. And I would say 2 to 3 months has been the average currently, but before it was a little quicker than that. There are just a lot of applications we got all at once that
a lot.
pushed the timeline back.
I'll tell you, that's outstanding. I've got a rental property, they applied in January, just in the last week got a check. So almost 11 months.
That was not in the county.
That is in the city, that's in the city. So you guys are hitting it out of the park. If you turn it around 2 to 3, 4 months, that's outstanding, thank you.
We're really concerned that landlords, you know, when we send out an email when we receive the application, and the client, the applicant normally sends it to their landlord. And we know that the landlords are counting on us to follow through. So we're trying. But when we jumped from 350 applications a month to 1,000, it took us another 30 days. And that's part of why we're closing the wait list. We just don't think that's good customer service, or, you know, especially for the landlords that are counting on it and the applicants that are waiting, worried about losing their housing.
Yeah, thank you.
So one other question, so when they're applying for rental assistance, is it for the entire month's rent, or is some of it just for gap funding for, like, rents have gone up and they can't afford the increase? And
It depends. There's a lot of people who just haven't, for whatever reason, they lost their job during COVID and haven't been able to find another one now. Or there are, I've heard of several people that their rent was $800 and they're on a fixed income and now their rent's $1,200. So we get a variety of different applicants. So it would just depend on the application.
And so once these programs go away, since we know they're going away, what kind of programs did you have pre-COVID, I guess?
There weren't rental assistance programs of any scale. Yeah, pre-COVID. We're hoping that there will be a new commerce-funded program, we're hearing.
The legislature passed some legislation, and it flows to the cities and counties. I did not bring that along with me, what that information was.
We can get it over to you, Scott. I think it's 1277. In fact, we're starting to ask a little bit about it and whether it's going to kick in time for when this winds down. But I am highly confident that the scale won't be anything as significant as this, so.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting too, what affidavit has to be, information has to be provided in the affidavit on the person's side too, for those funds, as I think it was stricter pre-COVID, and then it lightened up where it was just, you just had to sign an affidavit saying you were impacted. And so I'm assuming we will go back to a little bit more. And then what is 80% of AMI here in the area, and is that considered for, I'm assuming you look at it from an individual standpoint as well as a family?
Yeah, so there's a 1-person household, a 2-person household, and I don't have the chart, but I'm almost positive 80% area median income for a 1-person household is around $42,000 a year. But I could get the chart to you if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd be interested. Yeah. Scott can distribute it to us.
Okay.
Just to know what they're thinking of, like for a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 kids and all that too.
Not to be confused with the federal poverty level, which is a different calculation.
It sure is, yeah.
It's all those different calculations and formulas.
Yeah.
So.
Once SNAP distributes the remaining about $8 million, I know you've seen this before, and it's on the dashboard, but it's important to highlight. SNAP will have put out over $50 million in rental assistance to our community. That's what the county had received either through Treasury or State Commerce. So it's a significant amount of money, it's a significant amount of work. SNAP's been a tremendous partner to work with. They've been very responsive as we've asked them for information, provided us updates so that we could feed the website so that our community can see what's been put out. They've been really, really great to work with. So I appreciate all of your work. It's been a lot of work. You've been staffing, having to deal with staffing challenges just as other organizations have had to as well. And they've also, it's not just, as we've had a chance to talk with them, they're scrutinizing individuals who come in multiple times and asking them some tough questions around what are you doing for work and how are you trying to get yourself secure and stabilized once the rental assistance goes away. So it hasn't been just a very passive hand the money out. They've been asking questions and doing some really good screening and putting those difficult questions to the people who are asking for it. So they've been doing a really great job.
Thank you, and I guess I would just like to say, during a crisis, having partnerships in place ahead of time so that when you call and say, will you step up and do this, is really important. So you guys have been great to work with as well. I mean, those are systems under stress, and thanks to our team and our partnership, I think is what made this happen. I would say on kind of the anti-theft, fraud, brand protection, we have many programs that require 100% certification. So even for us to go to self-certification is great on the mission side, but I have the same worries that probably keep you up at night. It's not a matter of probably if we'll have some challenges, it's just when. So we worry about those same things you do too, right? And we want to get people served, but we want to do it responsibly as well. So thanks for your patience. We get those calls every once in a while, or I do. I'm like, oh geez, what's this? Like, let's look, so. And I know we're pretty good. We read our contracts carefully. And if there's any concern about fraud, we're immediately calling saying, here's one that looks weird. We're required to report it to you, over to you. So I would say though, they 90 plus look really good, maybe 95 would be my guess. But there's always that handful that you're self-attesting, you're signing that this is legally, what you say. So we're taking you at your word, right?
And I think it's also been very beneficial for the county and for our residents that we're serving to have one partner in this, one place to go for rental assistance as opposed to multiple. So it's created clarity, one-stop shopping.
Yes.
Yep.
Smart move.
And being able to handle all those dollars as well has been very, very helpful.
Well, thank you for your partnership. Do appreciate it. So you guys.
Appreciate all of you guys have done.
I also want to say thank you to the SNAP team because we've had many conversations about that dashboard, getting that thing up and going and maintained and like weekly for almost a year now. And it's been really good to work with you guys on that. So it's a complicated website, but it is getting a lot of traffic. We tried to make it as user-friendly as possible on a complicated couple spreadsheets.
You're welcome.
Hi, Scott. This is Aaron with Snap. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
If you guys would like, I can share the screen and share with you the AMI for the Spokane region if you would like to see that.
I don't know if we have screen sharing enabled, Aaron, but if you want to just email that over to me, I'll share that with the commissioners.
Okay, I can do that.
All right.
I would
Thank you.
appreciate that. And I'm sorry, I had my back turned to you. So was there anything you wanted to add to the presentation?
No, I think Chelsea did a great job. Lucy and Julie fielded questions as well. So I made to be a silent partner here.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
you.
Appreciate you being here today. And drive safely. Okay, now it's going to take us to Kyle. You've got a whole list.
Yeah, lots of fun stuff. Okay, we're gonna start with our briefing on the Sun Acres Pump Station. Luz and Ben are here. They'll be briefing this item. This has been, I can't remember exactly what year this discussion started, but we're finally getting to the conclusion of taking over the Sun Acres Pump Station from Vera.
Yeah, good morning. Back in probably around 2014, Kevin Wells from Vera and Kevin Cook from the county came to a understanding about the county taking on the roughly 41 customers there in the Sun Acres neighborhood that were on a community drain field that Vera was maintaining. And so in 2016, we took over, Vera built a pump station to our standards, and we took over operations of it in 2016. And so this is just the final agreement that conveys the pump station and the conveyance system to the county for our ownership and continued operation of the pump station and conveyance system. And we do owe $70,000 to the district for some of the upgrades that were done with the original station to make it more of a regional pump station, not just sized to serve 41 or 43 lots, but I put a map towards the end there. It could be upwards of 100 customers or more by the time the system is built out, and if we took on some more land that's currently outside of the UGA to the south. So like I say, we've been maintaining the station for about 6 years, and it's been working fine. Part of our overall system now. So, and Matt Koza's been working on the agreements with the attorney from Vera. I believe they have signed the agreement at this point. But, Matt, do you have more to add?
Thanks, Louis. Yeah, that's a good overview. And Vera has signed. It's just waiting for our signature. This was the reason we had to do this again is because the last agreement expired. So the current agreement basically just repeats the main points of the previous ones that we already agreed to, and provides that we'll transfer the property. So once this will be on the board's agenda for action next week, and for the next agenda, and then once the board does so, then we can sign and we'll keep operating as usual.
So how long is the agreement for then if the previous one expired?
This is the final agreement. There's nothing left to do. The reason the other one expired was the improvements weren't made in time, so it got amended and continued out, and then it just apparently fell through the cracks. And all the improvements have been made, so all that's left to do is to actually transfer the property in the system.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions? Very good, thank you.
And actually, Ben's gonna keep going to talk about the ILA with West Valley School District and our Outdoor Learning Center.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. Ben Bradable, Water Programs Manager. This is an update of an interlocal agreement that we have with West Valley Outdoor Learning Center it's be coming to you for review and approval to extend for another year. And this is something that we've done many times. It's $7,500, and it supports the West Valley Outdoor Learning Center creating curriculum for our water education programs. It brings students to the Water Resource Center at our water reclamation facility. It also promotes and develops curriculum and takes kids to Saltese Flats to have them learn about water curriculum out there as well. And so this funding is from the Aquifer Protection Area Fund, and is an update of previous agreements that we had. This is similar to programs we have with Meade School District up north in our sewer service area, and then also Central Valley School District. We have a program with them as well. So it's just one of three formal programs that we have with the different school districts to promote water-related education activities.
Great, and that's a valid use of the.
It is. It's a specific use is for education related to aquifer.
And they really do a tremendous job. Those exhibits and programs they create are really excellent. keep a lot of folks moving through those centers, and we're looking forward to what's going to be coming up next with Doris Morris.
Yeah, very excited.
And that's it. If there's any questions,
Questions for me? Nope. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So maybe a quick update though, when are we on Doris Morrison?
well, the Doris Morrison Learning Center is still scheduled for complete construction in February. We have did not get asphalt in this year, and so we'll be delaying the work to finish that. They're still working out for the interior. The building's all closed up, and they're still working on the interior. They're probably still working on some of the siding outside, but still scheduled for this spring.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I see Shannon. Hi, Shannon.
So Shannon and I are going to go through the funding for the Public Works Ops building. This is over at the Wilbert Vault site. We had discussed this a little bit in our capital briefing, but Shannon and I wanted to come forward and bring forward what the numbers really look like. And this is not an action item today. This is more of a getting the commissioners on board with the plan we have to move forward with this project and the way we are setting up our funding for the project, because subsequent to kind of a green light, then we're going to start making moves and bringing in consultants, setting up an application to the project review committee at the state, and really start moving forward into procuring the team to deliver this project. But we want to make sure we're all on the same page with regards to how we're going to pay for it and what that looks like for public works in our funds. So if we come up one more slide. Okay, so this is our just total facilities capital outlook for public works. We have shop projects coming forward with the districts. These are all relatively minor improvements to the shops, and then some storage facilities. Those are salt storage facilities for the most part at a couple of our locations. But you see the big number there, that nearly $20 million we have programmed in for the Wilbert Vault facility, which would be our public works operations. Looking at that kind of total number, because we want to put it all together, even though that Wilbert facility is the meat of it, we have about just shy of $10 million in place. One of those has not been transferred yet, and that's the proceeds from the sale of the driving track out of the small arms range. What is that called again? EVOC. EVOC, thank you. We have agreed to that. That number has been communicated back and forth. We're just waiting on drawing up the exchange agreement. The sheriff's office asked for a little additional space because they need a safety perimeter, which took about another 50 feet around the perimeter there. So that is moving forward right here. So we have the shift from 2022, the sales from the old corral, the sale of the motor pool facility to mental health stabilization, the small arms range, and we are looking forward to hopefully getting, I think you'll be seeing a little later today, some ARP funding with regards to the cleanup of that site and stormwater components to that, which I think you'll be hearing about shortly. So we did include it into our funding scenario. So that leaves us about $13 million shy. So if we go to the next slide, this is what I would call a relatively conservative loan schedule here that would have us going out for a commercial loan to cover that balance with a 10-year loan period, assuming we could probably get in the neighborhood of 6%, considering our standing here. When this is what our payment schedule would look like. So an important component to this is that Public Works has been paying off. We have been making loan payments that just expired this year. In 2021. So we've had a $1.56 million loan payment that just came off our books in 2021. We made our final payment. So Our program, in essence, has historically contemplated absorbing a loan in that amount. Going out to this would increase our annual debt burden by about $600,000 to go up to 1.7 million, which is a $600,000 hit, but we think that we can still operate within that, and don't think we'll see a substantial change to level of service, frankly, because we are not being successful in being fully staffed. So those kind of offset each other in a manner speaking with regards to our budget and the amount of work we can get done out on the street. So this is our kind of baseline scenario here, which is the most conservative we can get. So if we go to the next slide, this is a snapshot of our fund balance here. And if you have any questions, I'll have Shannon explain this to you. The important thing that I worry about is that ending fund balance and keeping that north of 4 million. Because of the timing of when our proceeds come through twice a year in the summertime, we can really draw that down low because of the timing of when our revenues come in, and we're just at peak spend in the summertime. So right before that amount, I don't like to see that get any lower than 4. I'd love to see it at 4.5. We'd be a little bit more comfortable, but we're not going to lose sleep at 4. And as you can see, there's only 2 years in the next 5 that we would be dipping below that. So we're dropping down our reserves right here. We do have a little bit of contingency in there, but a snow season can take that out at any given time. Very timely on that right now. So we're not incorporating that in. This is truly just the loan proceeds, what we know of what's going out for capital, our maintenance and preservation spend with a slight escalation to that, and relatively conservative with our projections here moving forward. Now, what's interesting about this is there's a lot of positive things that can happen to improve this funding scenario and potentially shift the way we look at that loan. And so we did throw another slide out here, if we go one more forward, that shows what this would look like if somewhere along the lines we got another 3.5 million. So whether anytime in the next few years there would be another shift, or whether there was another outside funding source, or potentially a combination of things. For instance, when this facility is completed, we will have 2 buildings on the campus of the mental health stabilization facility that could be surplused and could potentially become an expansion room for those operations, in which case we could dispose of those facilities because we would all be consolidated over onto the Wilbur Vault property. So there's options in there. We just threw a $3.5 million number out there for an example. And you can see it brings our annual payment real close to in line with our historical average, within $100,000 of that. Brings that debt down, or that loan amount down to 9.5. Takes about $1 million of interest out of that 10-year projection as well. So the point of this is just really simply to show one-time infusion of some additional funds can really dramatically, in fact, impact our schedule. But we are not dependent upon that. We don't see that as it's not a go no go for the project that we need that extra funds. It's just improves the situation considerably and gets us into a healthier fund balance much quicker. One more slide, I believe. Yeah. So here. This is that same 6-year projection you saw 2 slides ago, with that 3.5 incorporated in there. We threw it in 2024. It just makes everything a lot healthier moving forward, and would allow us to probably put some more dollars back. We would certainly just get more dollars back into our road networks that way.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead. The conversation we're having at CRAB is that we're anticipating that we're going to be losing the gas tax, which is also part of the revenue to feed our capital road grants program. And so we're already talking about what does that look like in terms of sustaining some of our programs, and unless we get help from the legislature, that fund is probably going to decrease. Now, there is talk about and I think Max was at the presentation about the road usage fund. We don't know where that's going to go and how that might backfeed some of this stuff. But you might want to do some sensitivity testing on this thing and find out how much does the gas tax have to move until it creates stress on your scenario, so that you anticipate that. And if we have to do something, well, from my standpoint, we had to do something with regard to the shift or something to accommodate that for a short period of time, maybe that's what we do. But just know that that conversation is going on with a heightened level of engagement than what we've had before.
Yeah, we were aware of that. It's just not knowing what that was going to do. It's like, what do you do with the what if scenarios? And with the escalation I have in there, basically it's just getting us back to pre-COVID dollars. So it's a very minimal escalation because our gas tax tanked with COVID, and we're still not back to where we were. So basically it flattens out to pre-COVID levels, and knowing that 6 years is a long time out to know what's kind of going on. But yeah, I'm totally anticipating that.
So we are talking, and we'll know more after this legislative session, but we are talking to some of our legislators about, does the carbon tax help offset some of the loss in gas tax here so that we can maintain that level of funding? But that's a big question mark now, and we'll know more in April than we do now.
Okay.
There is some sensitivity with some legislators that yes, we have to backfeed that with other sources of funds, but that's not universal yet. And I don't know whether it'll survive the session or not.
I don't know if they want to put any of that back into, some people don't want to put any of it back into roads.
No.
They're saying it's for the environment, and so it needs to be spent on the environment.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that's going to be unknown, I think, this legislative session. So my question is you talked about that this year you can absorb that additional 600,000 because you've got reduced in staffing reductions, but going forward, we would hope to fill that. So in my mind, we were going to be done with payments. Now we're back to payments. So that's 1.6 million. You said
1.7.
1.7. A year that is coming out of our not getting back into roads, that can't get our multiplier effect.
Mm-hmm.
And as I look at it, I want to get back to staffing as much as possible because frankly, we get such a higher bang for our buck. And so in these times when we are unable to get to 100%, we have to look at outsourcing more, which, paying a premium for that, which we're very, cognizant of. So that 600 delta is something that, right now we're well beyond that. I would love to get back to 100%. And if that's the problem that I have to worry about, pushing out $300,000 worth of roads, I'm less concerned about that because everything we're trying to do is we're still just struggling. And I would love to be in that problem.
And
frankly.
I also have to say, we definitely, that is one of the reasons our fund balance has escalated, besides the putting away the money, is we just haven't had the staff to get things done, and as well as supply shortages and things like that. But in this projection, I am assuming full staffing, assuming that if we don't have full staffing, that we will go outsource. And even though we won't still get the bang for our buck, we'll at least get some work done. Because we need to obviously start addressing it.
No, because certainly in my district, I've got a lot of rural roads that I get a lot of comments from all the time. And so if, the West Plains needs actual paved roads, but I still need dirt roads taken care of, taking, 1.7 million out of it means there's no dirt roads. So I don't know. I guess we make a decision on road shift tomorrow. Has to be when we look at that.
We'll have an updated spreadsheet to share with each of you this afternoon.
Okay.
And
Just because, I mean, that's my concern is that, as I was talking to people, and I don't know, you guys, roads are still a major concern that I have from my constituents. Especially a lot of the South County where they're doing commerce on those roads and they're actually starting to maintain them themselves instead of having the county, which is not a good scenario for us if the county puts a liability on us.
And on those unpaved roads, we are definitely the best resource to take care of them. It's easier to outsource on our paved roads. So, we want as much manpower as we have. I'm not optimistic, unfortunately. It's real tough. And not only do we have the staffing numbers, the experiential numbers are terrifying. So I think I shared with you already, 50% of our road maintenance staff has less than 3 years of experience. And the real bugger of it is that there's just nobody in the middle. It's 25, 35 years, or it's 3. And there's just nobody in the middle. And I don't see a solution to that other than we train more, we bring more in, and we keep going. So I'm really looking forward to bringing in some apprentices and taking them through and getting them their CDL and getting them working for us. One of the interesting things that doesn't really help with our gravel road situation, but I just got back from a public works conference, and one of the industry trends right now is they're starting to make more and more equipment that don't require a CDL. They're just moving their entire production because they just know nobody can get them. So if they want to sell us a piece of equipment, we're not buying because we don't have anybody to operate it. So they're trying to make as much as they can that don't require CDLs. And that might be a future we're looking at as well, which is what can we get by with with different pieces of equipment to move it forward. But when we did go through those scenarios, and we were playing with numbers, we went through many scenarios. We only wanted to show you one with $3.5 million infusion. But that shift is so monumental to our fund balance. It completely changes that. I mean, if you program 2 shifts into that, it looks entirely different, and that loan amount goes down even further. And so that's over 10 years contemplating no shifts. So we tried to give you the worst case scenario to contemplate, because that's what I have to plan for to move forward. If something changes and we are, get some of that additional funds, everything gets a lot healthier real fast.
On a shift as a year-to-year thing, so it's not something that can be determined.
Yeah.
So.
Commissioner. So just to address the concern that Commissioner CUNY brought up about short staffing has helped us grow some fund balances. But what you've projected, Kyle and Shannon, is assumptions that you're going to get back up to staffing and be able to do the level of maintenance that we've historically done. So in terms of, we're not planning on continuing to have short staffing that feed fund balance to meet that. We're planning on being staffed back up and getting out there and doing the work that we've historically been able to do and still meet the debt service on that. Is that right?
Correct.
Historically, at least since 2010, there's been a reduction in how much dirt roads. We kind of haven't had the funds. My understanding in the past was we didn't have the funds to do that. So it's kind of back in 2010 when everything kind of went down. At that point, we put less emphasis on dirt roads and didn't maintain them as we would hope.
If you'd like, I can give you the historical and what we have projected for next year for gravel roads in the maintenance and preservation budget. I'd be happy to.
So are you talking about grading of dirt roads, or are you talking about adding gravel to gravel roads? Because I think there's
some of them, it's as you maintain them, your maintenance for dirt roads is you're going to put gravel on at some point too. And I think talking to Jared Gimmel, when I first came on, when a lot of these issues were coming up for me, he was saying, we kind of abandoned dirt roads. We did the minimum that we had to do, but we weren't doing anything to really maintain them and get them up to where they should, you know, to continue to keep them in good working order.
Okay, because our gravel program and our grading of dirt roads are two completely different programs.
That's correct.
I mean, and I think the conversation here is
But they
kind of
all-
blending the two together. I mean,
They do, it is blending the two together, and it is two things. So our grading program, ideally in an ideal season, will hit every road 5 times. 3 times in the spring, twice in the fall. And they'll hold up pretty well, although we get summers like the last 2 summers where we don't see a drop of rain for 4 months, they struggle. But if we get them those 3 times in the spring, they do hold up real well. We get to, I think, is it 5 lane miles of regraveling a year about? And we tend to shift that around because we don't want to be trucking everywhere in the county because trucking is so expensive for bringing in gravel. So we just rebuilt, not Graham. What did we rebuild out in the West Plains just this fall? Just finished it. Which one? Was it? No, it's losing me right now. But you know, we did a 1.2 mile rebuild of a road out in the West Plains. I'm sorry, the name is escaping me right now. And we do have those programmed in throughout. Those are all self-performed, high staff utilization. So you're going to have more knowledge than I do about what has been, you know, going back 10, 15 years. I just know we're putting a lot of our internal focus on them, but and we hear that demand for additional gravel, and actually what I would call almost a rebuild of the gravel roads. And that's not even talking about some of the enhanced treatments where we've done like on Stevens Creek. But we're definitely looking into continuing that program. And there's just only so many miles we can do in a year with our crews as we move the crews between the different activities.
And funding.
Yeah. But funding is not a current issue, I would say, from a standpoint of, you know, we don't have enough people to do the work. We have the money to haul the rock and buy what we need to do the work. And we just don't have the bodies to spend it down, which is what builds up that beginning balance, which is why we're starting that healthy point.
you wouldn't use road fund shift dollars to pay for staffing.
No.
Okay, just want to make sure we're clear on that.
No.
It would go to pay for the capital, so then the money that's already in the road fund would go to take care of the other needs.
Okay, but and I know years past, I think, what was it, about 600,000 we put towards gravel to enhance, right? That was in December 2019, we put 500,000 or 600,000 into gravel, and then come March, we I don't know, you tell me where it ended up, but it didn't end up in any gravel that year, which we found out the next December that none of it actually went into gravel. So because we didn't know what was going to happen.
Right, because the gas tax went down, tanked, and so they had to have those funds for that.
Yeah. So
it's still an unforeseen circumstance.
No, I know. So okay, but I mean, road fund shift isn't used to put drivers into our graders and get them out there. That's happening whether the road fund shift happens or not.
And whether, you know, we have this debt service or not, that doesn't change.
Okay. All right.
So I look at it, if we do the road shift, it would be to take care of debt service. So that way then other funds could go towards the needs that we have for roads.
And I think that's exactly what we would be looking for. We would just drop that debt service down as quickly as possible and keep that fund healthy. So this is really kind of a comfort test for everybody to see how we feel moving forward. I really hit the brakes on any pre-design and pre-development work out on the site, because if we feel good about this and start moving forward, a lot of things are going to come together at once. You'll see every piece of it, which will be bringing in some owner's rep help. We'll we'll be putting in an application to the state to go for a progressive design build contract, then beginning a procurement for a progressive design builder. We'd be doing some early site remediation for some environmental investigation. We know what's there, but now we'll be getting into that time quickly after the beginning of the year where we need to start digging holes.
And just to clarify too, that us moving forward with the Wilbur Vault property is because of having to get out of the mental health stabilization building, allowing that to be used for that, having to move, so figuring out where we're really putting everybody. You've done some of that, but it's like, your facilities are tight at this point, I guess I would say.
They're tight, they're in pretty poor condition, especially the ones that are on the Wilbur site now are in scary condition, where we have our paint crew, our striping crew and bridge crew. Those buildings are in very dilapidated condition. So it would be really consolidating 4 of our operations onto that Wilbur Vault site, freeing up our entire presence on the block that's there with mental stabilization, not just the one building we moved out of, and keeping that site, improving that site, and honestly setting the stage for anything else in the future out there.
So if we didn't own the Wilbur Vault site, would that be the best site for this facility, or is there another site that would be a better site for this facility?
You're gonna ask that.
That's why they pay me the big bucks.
I would be looking at, you know what, if I could move all the chess pieces around, I would like to get our central shop out of town.
Yeah.
But for the crews that I'm talking about, this is a good place for them, actually, because these crews work in every corner of the district. They have close ties with their managers that are in the Public Works office, Public Works building right here. So my staff is going back and forth very consistently, and our projects are dispersed. So a lot of the signal crew has a lot of work in the valley. Our striping crews touch every road in the county. Our construction crews go wherever the projects are everywhere. That operation is, I do think, important to have centrally located and close enough to this campus that people can walk to the Public Works building and back. The fleet shop is the one that we're just moving a lot of big equipment right into downtown. That's the one I would like to see elsewhere, but that's
somewhere else.
That's not this project. That's the next one I gotta figure out. And when it comes to a nicely contaminated site, I do think we are well equipped to deal with that and be a good steward for that site. And so I do want to see these crews stay close by. I do have another crew I could see getting out of this area.
So the current building you're working in over there, the maintenance shop that's right next door to the transit garage?
Yeah.
Would you maintain that facility, or would you get rid of that?
Get rid of it.
Okay, so if we could find you a buyer for that?
No, we will be putting our new building right there.
Oh, okay, you're planning on building, new building there instead of, I always thought you were talking about putting it over on what, Ash and whatever, Maple or Maxwell? Yeah.
No, I think we would be fronting STA's garage right there on that side street.
Okay.
Be the best location for the building on that campus.
Okay.
That gives us, we'll still have that. We do use some of the overflow parking in there very consistently for the shop's needs, because they have such a tiny parking area. So when they have equipment in, they're constantly shuffling back and forth. But then we could have all of our operations, we'll have kind of the office space frontage side up against the street there towards the SDA garage, and then all of the heavy vehicle to the interior of the campus coming into the backside of that building.
So the property, let's say the corner of Maxwell and Maple.
Yeah.
that site up there, are you anticipating doing anything with that site at all?
No, we're gonna stay to the eastern half of the campus, and that side too also is by far the most contaminated.
But if we could find you a buyer for that, that would obviously, if you don't have any use for it, and we find another buyer for that, that puts money into the capital account to help cover some of the costs.
If there was a buyer for that, I don't think that we'd have a problem with that, as long as we, looking at the long-term growth of the county, don't see a need for it. Then you could certainly contemplate that entire block being a campus. But yes, I don't think that's off the table. I just, when I think about what our needs are in, 10, 20, 30 years, and, the county will inevitably grow, do we need more space? Are we gonna fill up all the buildings that are right here? Do we need to take entire departments to a facility over there? And the nice thing I like about that is you could actually have upwards, as I've just looked at the site layout there, like you could probably do 3 buildings there and still keep a ton of room for heavy equipment, material storage along the lines there, because you could use, we're keeping the proposed public works ops building to that eastern border. As you mentioned, that western corner right there, you have another potential, and then you also have up above on that rock shelf, in which case you could have something, or with even parking down below and taking people up. There's a lot of potential for the future of that campus in the long term, and I always worry about what we could, I really love the idea that, we potentially have, when we move out of our buildings on the mental health campus, there's a potential occupant there that, is internal and is gonna get good utilization there. My concern is always, what is it gonna cost us to replace anything? And what does the county's long-term needs are for growth, and does it need to be nearby?
Didn't you have a drawing that you did a while back? We just want to resend that.
I don't like it, but because it shows it in the middle of the campus, and I'll never do that again. We made that mistake once at the city, and that's not how I want to do it. When we did the Nelson Service Center over at the city's campus, they put the fleet shop in the middle of the campus. I was involved in that 12 years ago, and it was great for fleet and circulation. But then as soon as we tried to pluck another building down, that entire campus was basically now too small, because we didn't push the buildings to the outside edges. And especially when you talk about public works, the amount of parking we need is outstanding. It's almost 2 vehicles for every individual. So when you we tried to put wastewater operations out there, and we tried to put even my construction management office out there, we had used of all the space because we put the building in the middle, and the circulation needs just disrupted everything.
So if that map is not valid any longer, then maybe get an updated one.
Sure.
Just, even just hand drawn, just so that way
Absolutely.
people can see and understand. Okay. Okay, anything else for you and Shannon?
I just need to know if anybody has enough concerns that we need to hit the brakes.
No, I think we need to do it, it's just figuring out the funding side of it. And you've figured it out, it just means less money to our road network. So.
Hopefully our conservative estimates won't be our reality, but we always have to plan for that.
Yeah, you've got to be conservative at this point with not knowing what gas tax revenue is going to be doing. And okay, so then you've got Monty.
Yep, we've got Monty, and is Jim still around?
Yeah.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, yeah.
To call him.
We're here.
Okay.
And Mr. Valencia is on board, is he not? So we can bring up the overheads? Thank you very much.
So we've got 2 items to brief you here today. One of them is a kind of relatively interesting and complicated vacation correction, I guess I would call it, with regards to Ben Burr Road up south, and then briefing on the Beacon Hill TIF. So I think Jim's going to be taken a lot of this, so. Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Twig, and Monty's here too, and I told Monty that I would make the presentation, and of course, he can add information as we move forward. If I could have Mr. Valencia, please go to the overhead dealing with the vacation of the Ben Burr Road.
Just give them 1 minute, please.
And my understanding is the Board of County Commissioners have a copy of the presentation, so I think it would be good as I make the presentation, board members, for you to look at the map attached to it, and it's a colored map, and it's very helpful as I explained what we're doing here. While you're looking at the map, I'll give you the background. In May 24th of 2013, Mr. Black filed an application to vacate a portion of the Ben Burr right-of-way. It's generally identified in green on the map which I've attached. Subsequent to the board, and at the time he made the application to vacate the Ben Burr right-of-way, the reason for doing that is because Mr. Black owned the property immediately west of the Ben Burr right-of-way, and by vacating the Ben Burr right-of-way and moving it farther east, which is shown in the red, board members, the red dotted, it would facilitate his development of his property, and more importantly, it would help access off the Palouse Highway turning south on the Ben Burr right-of-way. Subsequent to Mr. Black's application, the Board of County Commissioners, this board members, in September of 2013, we approved the vacation of the Ben Burr right-of-way, generally outlined in green. And at the time we approved the vacation, there was an attachment to the vacation resolution, and it basically indicated that Mr. Black would be dedicating to the county, once we vacated the green, the property identified in red, if you will. In May of 2022, for the first time, the county engineer's office, we looked closely at the resolution we passed in 2013, and we realized that the legal description, if you look at the green again, it didn't stop where it stops right there. Instead, the legal description that we advertised to vacate vacated a portion of the Ben Burr right-of-way all the way down to 65th Avenue. It was never Mr. Black's intent, nor the county's intent, to vacate a strip of land on the following, if you will, the green right-of-way all the way down to 65th Avenue. Instead, it was the party's intent to only vacate the Ben Burr right-of-way as identified in green on that map. Additionally, for the first time in 2022, we realized that the property outlined in red on the map was not the right-of-way which was built by Mr. Black. In fact, the right-of-way that was built and accepted by the county is identified in yellow and orange. And you can see they're both different. So when the Public Works Department realized that the legal description that was described in the vacation resolution in 2013 included, if you will, the little tail, and also that the attachment didn't identify the as-built right-of-way, we determined we needed to modify the resolution executed in 2013 to correctly identify the right-of-way to be vacated, which is shown in green, and the attachment, which is the new right-of-way, which Mr. Black will be dedicating to the county, shown in yellow and in orange. The yellow is actually a 48-foot strip right-of-way, which is used for right-of-way. The orange on either side of it are the border easements, and the border easements are used for driveways, for signage, and for drainage. So what we have proposed is for the Board of County Commissioners to take action on your first meeting in December, where we modify the 2013 resolution. The changes are twofold. One, to modify the legal description to accurately represent what we vacated, eliminating the tail. And number two, to appropriately identify the right-of-way which was actually built by Mr. Black. And that is shown in yellow and orange on the proposed document. We have discussed this with Mr. Black. He's agreeable to the proposed changes. It does not affect any other property owners, and there's no necessity for a public hearing. This is just a resolution item. Does the board have any questions with regard to this proposed item? Chair Cuney.
So the yellow, orange is all within his property he owns currently?
That is correct, Commissioner Cuney.
Because there's apartments?
There are no
buildings all around?
apartments. No, there are no apartments there. This particular right-of-way was actually as-built, and as I say, the apartments are located, if you will, to the west of it, to the west of that right-of-way, and they already are constructed, Commissioner Cuney. You are correct. So, are there any other further questions? And this has been quite complicated because your public works staff, thank you to Ms. Firkins, prepared a lot of conveyance documents with regard to this particular item. And so we've carefully looked at those, and so we feel very comfortable in recommending to the board that you approve the draft resolution which has been prepared and will be before you next Tuesday during your regular agenda as a consent item. Any questions by any of the board members? Okay, are we ready to move to the second item, Commissioner Cuney?
Yes.
As Mr. Tui identified, it's really a complicated item, but I've tried to make it very simple. And if I could please go to the map, board members, which I've given you, because the easiest way to understand what I'm doing is to go to the map. And while you're flipping to the map, I will go to the presentation. In November of 2013, the board approved the establishment of the Beacon Hill TIF. And if you look at the map, board members, the Beacon Hill TIF is identified in green on the map. The Beacon Hill TIF is a unique TIF because most of the property, board members, is included within the city of Spokane. And if you look at the map, the only portion that is included in the unincorporated area is north, and it's north of that heavy line if you're looking at it. Very little of the property is included in the unincorporated area. Most of it's included in the city. But even given that, this Board of County Commissioners approved the formation of the Beacon Hill TIF. And when we approved the formation of the Beacon Hill TIF, there were certain public improvements that were the responsibility of the city, and there were certain public improvements with the responsibility of the developer. The public improvements which are the responsibility of the developer are in the area which is hatched in blue. The responsibility of the city of Spokane were in the area, if you will, to the west of the hatched area. There were public improvements responsibility of the city of Spokane in that particular area. This particular TIF was unique because the Board of County Commissioners wanted to encourage the developer to develop property in the TIF. So when the TIF was formed, the TIF documents said that the developer would be given tax allocation revenues for public improvements in the hatched area only until 2018, or if the county issued bonds or there were $500,000 in tax allocation revenues in the hatched area. Why'd we do that? Because we were concerned that the developer wouldn't move forward to develop the property. So when the TIF was formed, it was very unique, and it basically said that the developer would only get tax allocation revenues for public improvements in the blue area until 2018, or if the county issued bonds, or if the developer developed enough property within the sub area that it would generate $500,000 in tax allocation revenue. When we got to 2018, the developer came to Spokane County in the city and they said, you know what? The county won't issue bonds for this particular TIF. Would you please extend the 2018 date till 2019? And the city of Spokane and Spokane County agreed to extend that 1 year. In 2019, the developer came to the city of Spokane and Spokane County and said, you know what? We're not going to be able to generate $500,000 in this TIF by 2019. Would you extend it to 2026? And so the city of Spokane and Spokane County agreed to do that. What that basically said is that the developer can continue to use tax allocation revenues generated in the hatched area.
So 2026 or 2029?
2020, 2019. 2029, Josh.
29, okay.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
No problem.
2029.
I just wanted to make sure.
You can continue to use tax allocation revenues generated in that area until 2029. And so he felt pretty comfortable. Most recently, the developer came to Spokane County and said, you know what? I want the county to pay for public improvements that I'm going to be putting in the Beacon Hill sub area. And we don't have an agreement in place that indicates how that happens. You recall the county commissioners have an agreement in place right now for the Liberty Lake TIF, and it's been running smooth for a long time. But we had no reimbursement agreement in place dealing with what the developer would do when he put in a public improvement and he came to the county and said, please reimburse me for that. So the developer said, I would like the county to consider executing a development agreement that shows how I can come in and request the county to reimburse me when I put in public improvements from the tax allocation revenue generated in the hatched area. And he said, incidentally, you've already got one of these agreements in place with Kendall Yards. Let's use that as a template. So based upon that, city legal counsel, county legal counsel took the Kendall Yards reimbursement agreement and modified it so that it was applicable to the Beacon Hill TIF. It took a lot of time because it's a 43-page document. Subsequent to reviewing the reimbursement agreement, we had Mr. Cogan, who was then our bond counsel, look at it. He said it was lawful and he felt comfortable with it. And when we got new bond counsel, we sent it to our new bond counsel, and Pacifica has reviewed it, and they've advised that they feel comfortable that the language in the reimbursement agreement is lawful and acceptable. So the reason we have before you next Tuesday execution of two documents. The first document modifies the interlocal agreement between the city and the county with regard to the Beacon Hill TIF. And it basically provides that, number one, the county will no longer issue bonds in conjunction with the public improvements for the TIF. Number two, it provides that the developers have through the end of the TIF, which is December 31st, 2043, they have until that time frame to use tax allocation revenues to pay for public improvements. Remember, Commissioner Kearns just reminded me that they had until December 31st, 2029. Now that date's been extended to December 31st, 2043, which is the end of the TIF. So they have that time frame to use tax allocation revenues to pay for public improvements within the hatched area on the document. So the first document that we're executing is an amendment to the interlocal agreement between the city and the county, which says just what I've told you. The city of Spokane has agreed to that, and they are willing to sign revised interlocal agreement. The second item is the reimbursement agreement. It's a complicated agreement, but it basically sets forth the circumstances under which the developer will get reimbursed for public improvements. And there are two processes similar to what we have right now. One is he comes to the county at the outset and says, I'd like you to purchase this public improvement once it's done. He has to comply with county public bidding. He has to comply with prevailing wages. He has to comply with City of Spokane standards. Option number two, he bets on the come and he goes in and puts in a particular public improvement. And then once it's in, he comes to the county and says, will you reimburse me for this? Under option number two, he doesn't have to comply with county public bidding, but he has to comply with prevailing wage laws. And under this particular option, the reimbursement agreement identifies what the developer and the county and the city will do in conjunction with accepting the public improvements which have been constructed by the developer within the blue area on the map. So I apologize that this is so confusing, but if you think the presentation is confusing, it took a long time to get through the documents to bring it to this point. I think legal counsel are recommending from a legal perspective, we see no problems with the board moving forward and executing the revised interlocal agreement as well as the reimbursement agreement, both dealing with Beacon Hill.
Just go ahead before I've got lots too.
So one of the reasons why the Liberty Lake TIF works so well is that the developer had the wherewithal to be able to come in and build all the improvements and carry that cost and did not seek reimbursement until the county had signed off on everything and it was accepted per county standards. So the developer had the wherewithal to be able to perform and did so, and then we performed by reimbursing them. Is it your understanding or expectation that the developer for Beacon Hill has the same wherewithal to be able to construct the improvements covered by the TIF, get it accepted by the county, and then submit the reimbursement? Or is this going to be set up where we are functioning basically as the bank, as a pay-as-you-go, and as he gets monthly reimbursement statements from its contractor, he's going to be submitting that to the county, and we're going to be paying for those as the work is performed?
Not quite right. Yeah, no, the work should be commissioners.
Well, Commissioner French, you ask a good question. We've used the same template that we have in Kendall Yards. Under option two, let me say this. The original developer of Beacon Hill has 3 new partners. The 3 new partners, as well as the original developer, are executing the reimbursement agreement. It's my understanding that the new developers have the resources to build the public improvements that we're talking about. Once they're built, they will come into the county and ask, and they will tender these improvements to us when they're built. What's different between this and the Liberty Lake is, under the Liberty Lake, when we accepted those, we had sufficient resources in the tax allocation account to reimburse them entirely for their public improvement costs. We do not expect to have that in this particular case. So under this option, the developer puts in the improvements and pays for them, and then they come to the county, we accept those improvements and we tell them in a purchase and sale agreement, when and if we have sufficient money in the tax allocation account, we will reimburse you this agreed upon amount of money for that public improvement. So it's different in the respect, Commissioner French, that under the Liberty Lake, we had a lot of money in this account and we paid for the improvements when they were tendered. In this particular case, they will pay for them and then we will sign an agreement indicating that if and when we get enough money, we'll reimburse them. If there's no sufficient monies by 2043, the end of the TIF, they don't get reimbursed for those and they have to eat all the costs. So it's different in that regard, and arguably, Commissioner French, they could take the purchase and sale agreement and they might be able to take that and go to a lending institution and get resources. And we feel that this is not a lending of credit in the way we've drafted the particular documents. So, in answer to your question, I think that's one reason why the original developer has come to the county with the reimbursement agreement, is that he has new partners, and there are 3 new partners that they've advised us have sufficient resources to put in the public improvements.
So let's say that, just for laughs and giggles, the total amount of the construction for the improvements comes to $5 million. And by the time that they're installed and we look at the revenue available to us in the TIF account, and there's only $100,000 available in the TIF account, is the expectation then that the county will fund the 4.9 million to make up the difference? Or are we only reimbursing based upon the money available in the TIF account?
The latter, Commissioner French.
Okay,
We
so
only
it could be
reimburse.
several years before there's enough money to fully refund, or never, the construction, but that risk is totally borne by the developer.
Very clear throughout all the documents, there's no question about it. And I even had, looking down the road, Mark and I realizing that we were going to be issuing other bonds and we didn't want to adversely affect the county's credit. That's why we had bond counsel look at this document to make it very clear that this does not affect our credit rating or anything like that, Commissioner French.
Okay, thank you.
So I apologize for this being so confusing, but the map is really the key to this, understanding what we're doing. Chair Cuney, do you have a question?
Well, so because my understanding, as you said at the beginning, most of this is in the city of Spokane.
That is correct.
Correct. So is the city, because it's really their tax increment financing that they're losing to pay the developer. So why would we want to sign this until after? Wouldn't we want to wait till after the city of Spokane has signed it?
If that's, you've asked 2 questions, Commissioner Cooney, both good questions. Number 1, the amendment to the interlocal agreement, I'm advised by Assistant City Attorney James Richmond that he's briefed his clients and they will sign the document. If you prefer to have them sign it first, of course, we can make that motion next Tuesday, and I'll tell Mr. Richmond that the county would prefer to have them sign the agreement first. And you're correct, they have the most to lose because they're allowing the developer to use the tax allocation revenue generated in the blue through the remainder of the TIF, not just through December 2029 as Mr. Kern. So, and they've agreed to that. And so I can certainly communicate that to them.
It's just a question.
Yeah, no, that's good. But as I say, I have a communication, they've agreed to it. And I will confirm that and indicate that the board's motion will more than likely be to allow the execution of the ILA subsequent to execution by the city of Spokane. If that's what the board's direction is, I can certainly include that. You're right, Chair Cuney. They have the most to lose. You're correct.
I mean, I feel better about that because otherwise then we're basically signing it ahead of them, and if they want to make a change or an amendment,
right,
it's really their kind of risk reward more so than ours. in my mind, we're more just administrative for this.
That's a correct statement, Commissioner Cooney, and yes, I'll run through that. What I was hoping to do is, because we kind of formed this TIF, I was hoping that this board could act on these two items before the end of the year, so I wouldn't have to necessarily brief two new board members on it. And of course, you can do that by taking action next Tuesday, even with the conditions that I understand the board may want me to include.
So we have not agreed to the extension of the TIF for the West Central neighborhood because we were waiting for a commitment from the city to not levy the utility tax in the valley. So in the spirit of consistency, do we have the same expectation in this TIF realignment or not? And I'm not campaigning one way or the other. I'm just raising the question because I'm sure that somebody will come back and say, you did it there, why not there?
I think, I'm looking at Mr. Simmons, I think the city has made some decision with the imposition of the utilities tax on a certain limited group of people, but I'm not privy to the entire discussion.
No,
They have
I'm
not.
not aware of that, no.
I can tell you that notices have already been sent out.
Completely
Different issue?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it's related, but no,
Okay.
to my knowledge, we've not received anything from the city that would say they would not, they're not still looking to impose it on our wastewater treatment plant.
I'm correct, that is a correct statement. So I'm looking at the chair and the board members. So my present intent is to place both these items as on your next regular agenda, next Tuesday, as consent items with no public hearing requirements. And unless I hear to the contrary, I'll give all the documents to the clerk. And then if the board wants to strike them or not take action on them, you certainly, that is your option.
I don't know what we want to do.
Yeah, I guess for me, at a minimum, I want to make sure the city is approved them because we've had, I mean, that's been part of the issue too with the West Central neighborhood TIF is that they actually all haven't agreed. I'd like to some of the, because when I was talking to some council members, it's not just, the utility tax, it's also the, correct me if I'm wrong, that some of them wanting to make sure the money stayed within the West Central neighborhood versus it was getting used for other purposes. And that they didn't clarify, that hasn't been clarified for us to take action, which was why it's, again, it's really a city function. We're just there administratively. That I want to make sure the city has approved. I'm thinking it's option 2 because we don't want to be in any kind of issue where we're having to pay out money ahead of receiving the tax increment financing.
Right.
Because we handle the administrative side of the.
That is correct, Chair Cuny. That is correct.
Financing.
Our treasurer's office always handles all of that with respect to all these TIFs.
So since it's a city event, it should be, in my mind, reimbursement similar to what we do with Liberty Lake on the TIF that was out there. Because it was always after the fact. The developer was the one who put the money forward. And I believe, I don't know, the others.
Still an after the fact issue here, right? There's nothing in here that would allow an advancement of funds in any way, right?
But what I don't want is for us to sign it and the city to say, oh, no, we want to go option 1.
Well, Commissioner Cuny, both options are in the reimbursement agreement because it's similar to Kendall Yards. The developer tells me that they're gonna go for option 2 only. They don't want to go with option 1 because they don't want to comply with the public bidding and the prevailing wages and bet on the come.
So why would we have that in the agreement? Why don't we just set it up as it's option 2 only?
Yeah.
We can certainly modify the document if you want to make it solely an option 2.
Because option 1 puts us at risk.
Yes.
We're providing the bank, right? Because if they, we're giving them funds ahead of it, if they've done.
No.
Okay,
In either circumstance, they expend the money and then they come in and request reimbursement. Under option 1, they can do it, if you will, they have to comply with public bidding and provide with prevailing wages, and then they can come in and they can request payment for, let's just assume this, for engineering. They could come in and request it for engineering if they wanted to. Under option 2, they come in all the way at the end, Commissioner Cuney. They don't come in. So under either option, I don't think there's any risk to the county, because under either option, they don't get paid if there's no money in the tax allocation account under any circumstances.
Excuse me, Commissioner. I do think one of the one risk, Jim, if I may interject in that, is with option 1, if they did go that route, if they procured design services, got reimbursed for that before moving on with the project and scrapped the project or changed the design. So something like that could be at risk, correct?
And I think what you're saying, Mr. Twig, is what say they just do one phase and stop, and they just design it, and they don't move forward to construct, if you will.
Yes.
I would agree the way the present draft is, and again, yes, that is a correct thing.
If it fell apart or if they got through some level of expenditure, but we didn't get all the way to the finish line of public improvement through option 1, there are portions of that could be expended. That's a potential scenario.
I didn't, and board members, I would say this to you, we signed the same agreement, and I'm not sure it's right, on Kendall Yards, because we're part of Kendall Yards, as you probably know. And so we signed a similar agreement with them, and of course, Kendall Yards, as we know, was a very successful development, and so we didn't have to worry, if you will, about some of the issues that Commissioner French and Chair Cuney are raising right now.
you had one more question.
Well, I agree with you. I'd just as soon strike option 1 from the agreement and just leave option 2 as the only option. So that there is not, I'd hate to have engineering drawings done and then all of a sudden they change direction and now we paid several $100,000 for engineering that we've got no value for. That doesn't seem to be a good investment from the taxpayer standpoint. And then the other part of it is, just for the records, we've got a reporter in the room. I am supportive of approving both TIFs, subject to the city giving us some kind of assurance that they're not going to levy utility tax. If we're going to waive that, that's a conversation we need to have, but right now, that's the last stand. And I'd love to be able to do something for West Central. I'd love to be able to get some new housing up in Beacon Hill. Lord knows this thing started when I was on the city council back in 1820. So, it's been a long time. So, love to be able to see something actually happen there.
I'll jump in. Yeah, no, I agree. If we want to just have option 2 as the only option on there, I'm comfortable with that. I think Commissioner Cuney is right. Let's let the city pass it first before we do it. But we need to convey that we only want one of those options. I can make sure that's clear. Beacon Hill does benefit. It's in the NEPDA, which we're a part of.
Yep.
And where it's located is the district that's represented by the 2 members on the council who have said that they are opposed to the utility tax. So something else to keep in mind on its location and its benefit to the county.
So Chair Cuney, my direction then, I plan on number 1, I will attempt to go through and modify the 43-page reimbursement agreement with the developer within the next week, so I can bring it back with just option 2. And then number 2, I'll communicate to the city that if the board acts on these next Tuesday on your regular agenda's consent items, it'll be subject to the city of Spokane executing the amended ILA before the county signs off on it. And I think that's the direction I'm hearing from the board members. I guess there was one I wasn't quite sure of. I guess I'm assuming that we're gonna act on these, because remember, as Commissioner French reminded me, we haven't acted on another request from the city for various reasons. And I don't expect the board to take action, but as I get the documents ready, I give them to the clerk. The chair of the board can determine if she still wants them on next Tuesday's regular agenda as consent items.
So I think I'm hearing that as long as the city, it's conditioned upon the city approving it first, we're willing to do it just partly because of our participation in the Northeast PDA.
Okay.
Instead of waiting like for the other TIF, we are doing for the other TIF, is that?
That's where I'm at.
Thank you very much, Chair Cooney. I'm sorry this is so complicated. I didn't know Commissioner French was going to raise a couple of issues, and Commissioner Keeney was too, but we'll take care of those.
Well, and I would just say, just because, you know, a TIF is modeled off one that's already been done, doesn't mean that that's the right TIF agreement for the current one. And so they can always be a guide, but we've got to look at each one individually because each one stands on its own.
Understand, Chair Cooney, that was, and I did propose to the Developers Council using the template that we used at Liberty Lake because I liked it. That was about a 3-month time frame for Mr. Frankovic and I to come up with that process, and he opted to use this one. So, but we'll work it through. Thank you for your interest and your direction.
Thank you. Thank you for being here too, Monty.
I did a lot.
Okay, that's gonna take us to Erin. I see Erin on Zoom. We're gonna do a presentation on the fair.
Good morning. I have 2 items I'm presenting to you today. One, discussing our proposed 2023 rental rates. And then the second item, I'm sharing with you a recap of the Interstate Fair. So I'll just go ahead and dive into my briefing on our rental rates. I don't have any fancy slides or anything to entertain you with on this. It's pretty short and sweet. We are proposing a 10% rental rate for our non-fair events throughout the year to help, you know, with the increased costs and inflation, utilities, labor, and other operational expenses. It has been a number of years since we have had a rental rate increase. So this is long overdue. Planning for this to go into effect January 1st, 2023, and it is on your consent agenda for December 6th. In addition to this 10% rate increase, we are also working on a 5-year plan for our facility, looking just at our continued sustainability and how we can create a capital fund for future projects and needs. With this rate increase, it's going to help us sustain what we're already doing here, covering our operating expenses, and again, hoping to generate those extra funds towards capital projects in the future. That is my summary on that. Do you have any questions?
Commissioner French?
So have you given any additional thought to how we accommodate other organizations? I'm thinking specifically about Cattlemen's Association, which doesn't raise money. They're just an educational program out there, and all they do is take a table and pass out literature and educate people about the great industry of cattlemen.
Sure. So that would be on the fair side of rates, and I will be coming back to you probably in the early spring to talk about that. But we did work with the Cattlemen's Association to offer a prorated rate to be out here for, I believe they were here 4 or 5 days during the fair. So we do look at some of those things case by case, but we do charge a rate for everyone to be out here as an enterprise fund, just covering our costs, but we do try to offer some flexibility. Again, 10 days is a lot of days to be out here. And if we can work with someone to be here on a reduced number of days, we will prorate their rate to be here.
Thank you.
If you're requesting something different, then let me know if that's something we need to explore.
Well, I would be requesting something different, for those industry. I mean, when you look at the history of the fair, it's really about, celebration of harvest for the ag industry and anything that promotes the ag industry, especially as they continue to be under pressure. It just seems to be, ag is still, to my knowledge, our biggest export in the county. Just seems to me that when we can educate, they're not, like I say, they're not raising money. They're not an enterprise. They're just there to educate folks about getting into the business. It just seems to me that whatever we could do to help promote that in the long term promotes industry in the county. So just my observation.
And I appreciate that. We do have a number of groups. Obviously, like you said, fairs are ag-based, and that is our mission to continue with that education to our public. And, that's getting harder to do. So those partners are important to us. We work with the master gardeners, the beekeepers, and a number of groups as well that have displays out here at the fair.
So I think to do something like that, we'd probably have to do like a kind of like a little fund that we would give to the fair that they could, since they are an enterprise fund, they can't say kind of like scholarship in some of those organizations. It would have to be the commissioners deciding from the general fund to do something like that. So I think that's the only way I could see that happening, right, Erin?
Yeah, and I think we can get creative on this. There's also fair funding that we receive from the state level as well. So I think we could explore some things through that funding as well.
Thank you. Okay, let's talk about the fair.
Okay, is Ron hiding in there somewhere? Is he able to bring my PowerPoint up pretty please? Thank you so much, Ron. Okay. It was definitely all systems go this year, and we felt it. We packed the house, and we had an exciting 10 days here at the fair. It was our 71st fair held at our facility. Ron, if you could please advance to the third slide. Thank you. We had over 210,000 attendees during our 10 days. In 2019, which was an exceptional year for us as well, we had over 206,000 attendees. So we were really excited to see that increase in the number of guests. Our second Saturday of the fair had our highest attendance with over 41,000 attendees. So if you were brave to come on that Saturday, kudos to you. It took some work to get in here. Next slide, please. We saw record-breaking sales in our food, carnival, and our alcohol sales. Our food sales were up over $350,000 in comparison to 2019. Our carnival set records every day that they were here. They were a little bummed on the Monday of fair. They couldn't quite break that record because in 2008, we actually had an all-free day at the fair with over 30,000 attendees in one day on a Monday. So again, I don't know that they're going to be able to beat that record on a Monday when it's traditionally senior day, and they just don't seem to get into those rides. Next slide, please. Grandstand entertainment. If we could go to the next slide. We had 2 nights of PRCA rodeo, and just an outline of here where we captured some of our visitors were coming from through online ticket sales, and also where our contestants were traveling from to participate in our fair, as we are part of the PRCA circuit, and they come here to get those points and move on to the next fair down the road. Next slide, please. We had some great crowds, as you can see by this picture, taken at our Nelly concert night. Next slide. Cole Swindell. Again, a sampling of where some of our guests were coming from. Over 4,000 tickets sold, which is an exceptional concert night. If we can move to the next slide. El King, over 3,000 tickets sold. A lot of buzz around that night, a lot of excitement. If you could please move to the next slide. Nelly, that was our big night. We packed this place, as we saw by the photo, and just a lot of energy, a lot of excitement with all of our concert series. And if we could just move to the next slide, please. Truck and tractor pulls, over 2,700 tickets sold for this on Friday evening. And then the next slide, please. 2 nights of the demolition derbies, which are always a fan favorite, and we tend to sell out the Sunday event, but Saturday night gets pretty close. So with our 9 grandstand events, we sold over 26,000 tickets just for those attending events in the grandstands. The next slide, please. We're always working hard to bring in new attractions. We had our Longhorn display. We also offered a cornhole tournament all 10 days of the fair, and the tournament actually took place on the weekends, but we had cornhole available for fairgoers to participate in every day that they were out here, and a lot of positive feedback that it was a free activity that people could enjoy with their friends and family while at the fair. So we're looking to expand that again. And then we always bring in additional roving entertainment and new attractions on our north stage. Next slide, please. We had a number of new partnerships this year. We had a new security company that came on board in July. So a lot to work through, but we felt overall that was a successful partnership, and looking forward to building on it in the future. We were able to work with Rotary to help fill in the gaps of staffing at a number of our gates, and as ticket takers. The Rotary traditionally had the corn on the cob, turkey leg, baked potato booth. And with this new partnership, that opened up that space, and we were able to bring in the Spokane Valley Fire Department into this new space in a central location near the grandstands. And that really strengthened our relationship with Valley Fire. My staff totally did a rehab on the building, freshened it all up, and they said they gave out millions of Band-Aids. So it was great. We also had a new box office manager to oversee all of our ticketing. We had new maintenance staff members. And with the reduced support from Geiger, we were able to put together with a business partner to put together a trash removal crew for each day of the fair. That is just a huge undertaking to stay on top of all the garbage generated, especially in the food court areas. So they were invaluable to us. This crew also switched gears to clean our grandstands every night as well, so that they were ready for the next day for the next event. The next slide, please. Just a highlight of where a number of our vendors are coming from, with over 250 vendors participating in the fair. We are drawing from a number of areas throughout the Pacific Northwest and beyond. And the next slide. With that, it was an exceptional year, and we're excited and we're ready to start planning the 2023 Spokane County Interstate Fair. And we're working on themes and entertainment possibilities and new attractions, redesigning our layout, and how we can incorporate more agricultural education into the fair. And that's all I have. Do you have any questions?
No, thank you. Any questions for Erin? No, it's just exciting that it was an awesome fair. I mean, I think all of us were down there several times, so you guys did a great job. For the most part, the weather was pretty good, so I think
It
that probably
was.
helped with attendance and the smoke. I mean, I think this year we really didn't have any heavy smoke days like we had the past several years.
Definitely not. Maybe just a little bit on one day, but we worked through that, thankfully.
Yeah, so, no, so great job to you and your staff. I know you guys have worked hard, so.
Thank you. It was fun. It was, especially coming out of COVID, it was a big one for us, which felt so good to be back.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Well, have a good day and we'll talk to you
You
later.
too. Bye.
Okay. Keep going. Okay. I know it's gonna be rotating chairs. Gotta figure this out at some point. Flip a chair in there.
We're gonna swap out.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what you guys gonna do. Okay. Well, welcome, Ollie. Go ahead and start.
All right, good morning, commissioners. Thank you for opportunity to be here. We have 4 different items we're gonna brief on, and we know you have a tight schedule, so we're going to be fairly succinct if we can, but happy to answer any questions along the way. And the first item up, Mr. Knowles is going to address.
Okay, should have a presentation. Bring it up somewhere.
Which one?
Trolley trail. Ron, please. Oh, looked like it. There we go. All right. Well, good morning, board. I'm here to present on a Conservation Futures Program project, the Trolley Trail Vetch acquisition. So this is to be owned by the city of Spokane if successful, and this is related to a funding authorization resolution that we're hoping to bring to the board next Tuesday. Next slide, please. So a little context on location for this property. It's located southwest of downtown Spokane, west of 195 and just south of I-90, very near the Fish Lake Trail. And as you can see there on the photo on your right, or on the right there, is taken on the property, and you can see very well-used trails on this piece of privately owned property with the trolley line grade there on the left-hand side, which leads me to my next slide. So there actually used to be a trolley line that ran through this property that ran from downtown Spokane all the way out to Medical Lake. So it brought visitors out to Medical Lake to the various health resorts that were out there at one point in time. Next slide, please. So with this particular acquisition, it's 3¼ acres in size, 2 parcels. The purchase price has been negotiated to be within appraised value at $250,000. The city of Spokane has agreed to accept ownership of this property if successful. The other item is that it is a non-ranked administrative acquisition on our current Conservation Futures acquisition list, which simply means that it will, if successful, will resolve issues related to a past Conservation Futures acquisition. So in this case, the city of Spokane owns about 1.5 miles of the old trolley grade to the south. And basically what has been happening for years is folks walk that trolley grade on publicly owned land, and then that trolley grade continues onto privately owned land. So there is an ongoing trespassing issue that really can be effectively resolved through acquisition. And we'll go to the next slide where I'll explain that. So the funding authorization and written into the purchase and sale agreement is two contingencies related to closing, which will resolve that trespassing issue if successful. So basically, the city of Spokane needs to acquire a public trail easement or approval within a plat to accommodate that public trolley trail from the currently city-owned portion north through the subject property, which would basically allow for that trail to then be routed to the west to Grandview Park. So there would be an outlet to the trail and basically another entrance to access the trail. So folks would be able to walk along the trail the whole way and exit onto public-owned land or right-of-way. So this would effectively resolve the trespassing issue for the time being. So with that, the action item before you next Tuesday, if you're supportive, is to authorize expenditure of the Conservation Futures Fund to fund the acquisition of this trolley trail acquisition or fetch property.
So how does that affect our funding? Because there was that other piece of property that came up that was outside the acquisition.
The McPhee property, the unforeseen opportunity. It shouldn't have much of an impact at all on that. With the price being $250,000, very reasonable considering some of the past acquisitions recently had the pleasure to work on. And in addition, we have had some conversations with the treasurer about financing opportunities if that comes down the road, and he's expressed an interest in extending financing for conservation futures acquisitions if we need it down the road.
So the Canyon Bluffs partner project, which I believe is apartment complex on that hill. Where is that at in its approval process with the city? And how does that approval process affect this project?
It's a good question. I don't know where the approval process is at. I know that the city has had conversations with Canyon Bluffs partners and the representatives about a public trail easement. And this actually, where the trolley line grade goes and where that proposed public trail easement would go, Canyon Bluffs can't develop that portion of the property anyways because it was set aside in a previous plat approval as a undevelopable wildlife corridor, essentially.
Well, I know the city has issued a moratorium, so they're not permitting anything, and so I was just curious if they're withholding the permit for starting construction would impact the partnership's ability to perform their side of the agreement.
From my understanding, I don't think they're tied in that way.
Okay.
Now, the Westwood Hills Village plat, so the contingency number 1, that one's probably a little more of a question. Gary Rogers is the project proponent on that, and it sounds like that project's sort of potentially in transition of ownership there. So I don't have as clear of a vision on that, but the closing date on the purchase and sale agreement that's been executed between the city and the seller is pushed out to December 28th of next year. So that provides ample time for that to play out, I guess.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. And so if there's no additional questions on that, we'll move to our next item to brief on, which is our 2023 proposed park facility use and program fees. Hayden Harlan, our recreation coordinator, is here to provide a quick briefing and overview of these proposed fees.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. So I'll start with the north side and south side family aquatic facilities. So we propose 0 price adjustments to our public swim entries for 2023 as we achieve record revenue at both facilities related to entry fees in 22. And we anticipate similar revenues into 2023. We do propose a minor increase in fees related to private aquatic facility rentals, swim lesson, and swim team programming, which is based on our market comparison in the region. Language pertaining to cancellation fees and policies to reflect these proposed changes were also updated. Next up is Camp Carroll Lodge. We made small adjustment in fees for daily rental rates with an average increase less than 7%, which is based on market comparison and our customer feedback. We also updated cancellation fees and policies to reflect these changes as well. For our field and court rentals, additional language was added to clarify revenues from ball field and sport court rentals will be deposited into Special Revenue Fund 122. For Liberty Lake Regional Park, we do not have any proposed changes for entry fees for day use of the park. We do have proposed camping rates for all sites, which include a small increase of an average of $2 per night due to market rate changes in the region. And there's also some cancellation policy language updates as well. We do not have any proposed increase to 2023's fees related to shelter rentals. And last but not least, our special event permit fees. We propose a small increase on all fees with an average increase of 8%, which is primarily related to inflation rates in our current economy. We will arrange for this to be an agenda item on the December 6th consent agenda. And are there any questions?
Great. And we have a track changes version as part of the agenda sheet. If you are curious, that identifies any and all the changes, and of course a clean version to accompany the resolution. And if all sounds okay, we'll have that before you on the 6th, week from tomorrow, for consideration. Okay. And then next up, I'll speak to the 2023 proposed golf rates. We always like to have these laid out in advance. We start to have a lot of requests for advanced sales, which we're really pleased as part of the Christmas season, the Christmas shopping, if you will. So again, we're working to have this on your agenda, if all sounds fine, a week from tomorrow. We're recommending rates include minor increases necessary to support and sustain operations of our 3 golf courses while continuing to be competitive within our market. For context, in 2022, golf revenue, we're projecting to come in at $3.25 million, which works out to be $34,500 over our budgeted revenue. So we have very good forecasters. Trish Truitt, our finance manager, does a really good job in helping us manage this. This season, we had just over 100,000 rounds played, while slightly less than last year, just a couple percent. This was 12% higher than our 6-year average. We're always looking at that 6-year average. So significantly up overall, and we're really pleased with that. As you know, we had several great capital projects that we wrapped up here this season. Specific to the proposed rates, at the end of October, staff completed our annual rate comparison of a good dozen courses located within 35 miles of our county courses. So the survey results were analyzed by staff in combination with our projected 2023 operating expenses, future capital needs. So the proposed rates are projected to cover increases in maintenance and operation, costs such as fertilizer, utilities, and minimum wage, which will go up about 8.66% next year, and allow the golf fund to replace dated equipment necessary to maintain our phenomenal course conditions, which are the best public courses in the area. I just have to slip that in there. I'm really proud of the team. We just are so fortunate and so pleased. The proposal includes increases of about $1 for most green fees. These adjustments can be seen again in the track changes format that accompany the proposal. So that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, brief. Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think my last item to brief on then is just excited to provide an update on an interlocal agreement that I'm working towards bringing before you in the next couple of weeks. I'm projecting it'll probably be about 2 weeks from tomorrow, and that's with the city of Spokane Valley. We are working specifically on an interlocal agreement where we would share equally in the cost of completing a development plan for Plants Ferry Sports Complex. We would be using, the county, you may recall the ARPA funding that you graciously approved, where we're looking at approximately in the $5 million range, if you will, out there of making significant improvements that that we've been studying for quite some time over the last several years. We've done some studies in 16. They were looked at again in 20, and a lot's happened in this short time frame with COVID. So we're really pleased to have the opportunity to do an updated master development plan in coordination with the city. A big component of this, not only will it look to serve as a roadmap for how we will invest and enhance the facility, which we know we have a lot of tired infrastructure that's just about 20, 25 years old and ready for updating. But we're also looking to the study to provide some guidance in what a long-term partnership may look like with the city of Spokane Valley, and how we might explore shared operations, shared ownership, and so forth going forward. And the study will help identify other jurisdictions that have successful similar models. And so we're excited to be looking at that full picture. The city of Spokane Valley has been very supportive. I think I included a copy of their letter of support for the ARPA request funding that you should have. And we've just been working really well. And again, I think they're really supportive of the project. And in fact, through this interlocal agreement, the city will be taking lead on facilitating. We'll work with them to select a consultant and lead on that master development plan. So we're very excited, and the agreement right now is under review and should be ready for your review in the next couple of weeks.
So with that, so that is just, the interlocal agreement is just on getting the master development plan put together?
Correct, yes, and sharing equally in those costs, which I think we're, again, until we select a consultant, but we're estimating that total investment may be in the neighborhood of 100,000, which we would utilize some of the ARPA funds for our half of that. But it really will provide a great roadmap for how we would look at investing those funds and enhancing the facility. There's several areas that we've looked at with need for field lighting, for example, some updating of the fields, and again, they'll come in and we'll work with the community to take a look at this with fresh eyes and our other partners out there and the users, and really develop a full long-range phased plan. And we're confident with the ARPA funds, we'll be able to at least move forward with the first phase of that plan, if not more. And this will be that first step towards that in developing the master development plan.
And when do you think you've got the draft agreement?
It's under review right now with the city, and I think they're very close to sending that back. So I am optimistic I'll have that before you as soon as a week from tomorrow, but more likely the week after is what I'm anticipating. We'll have that all done and wrapped up.
Okay, as soon as you get it, can I get a copy? So
Of course, yeah, of course, absolutely. Any questions on that project or the interlocal agreement that I can address? Great. Okay. Well, that's all we have. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
See you.
I have a stop at the roads. I'm worried. I need to be somewhere at noon, but so I'd like to leave in like the next 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
So if you can.
Yeah, I was supposed to be over at GSI too,
Oh.
so, but that, I figured I'd hang around, because I love you people so much.
Don't worry, I'll hold down the fort. Get out of here. Get out of here.
Go ahead, we can leave.
I let Scott know that I had a tight time frame, so. So Scott, we'll let you go ahead and start, so.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Scott, thanks. And thanks for your perseverance on long days like this. We have three major things that we're bringing before you today. The countywide planning policies, the capital facilities plan, which has 3 components to itself, and then the this year's crop of the comprehensive plan amendments, of which there are 8. And I hope Ron has my slides popping up. And you can just go right to the next slide. Thank you, Ron. This, the countywide planning policies, as the 3 of you know, since you participate on the steering committee of elected officials, the steering committee did recommend these to you. They will be, with all of these, they will be on your December 13th agenda. The countywide planning policies and the capital facilities plan group will be in a public hearing, and the comp plan amendments will simply be the public meeting attached to your consent agenda. But as you can see, in a summary of the planning policies, reflecting what the planning, the PTAC, the professional staff, as well as the steering committee itself put in here. We summarize them in these statements, which you can generally see they range from substantive, which is moving the levels of service into the capital facilities plan program, which makes a lot more sense, and updating the policies for general growth, and taking out things that were set in the early policies that were really left us in a sort of unenviable position of not being able to live up to things we had acclaimed in 2011. So we cleaned these up to make them easier to drive policy among all of the jurisdictions in the county. Again, you've all participated in that. We have just a single slide to summarize those. Happy to answer any other questions you may have on this element. Okay, let's go on to the CFP group. Next slide, please, Rod. Next one again. There are 3 elements that we're going to bring before you in 2 weeks. One is the capital facilities plan amendment itself. The second is Chapter 7 of the comprehensive plan, which is where the CFP goals and objectives reside, and then a change to Spokane County Code 13-650, which talks about concurrency. They all go together. They have to be in conformance. So starting with the capital facilities plan, again, you've been through this before. Certainly the connecting link here is capital improvements programs that are done throughout the county. And most recently, the last point on here, the Court of Appeals decision, which added a number of these items back onto the planning agenda that we had not anticipated earlier in the year. And so there are things like the schools, the fire districts, capital facilities, general government facilities, all were kind of pushed back onto our planning agenda by the court decision, which is only a month or so ago. So next slide, please. There are 2 basic groups that we're looking at. Most important to us is generally the county-owned facilities. You can see the 7 of them listed here. Those are elements that we look for in terms of capacities, in terms of inventories, future growth needs for all of these, and that's within the window out to 2037. This is, just as a reminder, this is amendment to the 2017 CFP, which was most recently adopted in 2020. And the agreement is we're updating this document. We will do another kind of clean sheet of paper version starting next year that will go into the annual cycle leading to the 2026 comp plan update. But that's why all of these elements are here. And then on the next slide, please. These are the 3 special districts, the schools, fire districts, and water that we've handled. The challenge we have, and frankly every county has, is with special districts, they don't have to plan under the Growth Management Act rules the way the county does. And so they don't have parallel processes. In many cases, they don't do traditional capital facilities planning. Schools and districts typically look at where their growth is and then try to pass a bond or have some other funding mechanism to react to that growth and try to stay somewhat ahead of it. But it makes it very difficult for us to gather data to substantiate how they fit into the overall growth pattern of the county. Nonetheless, we have done fairly well at most of this. Next slide, please.
And we filed the appeal on that decision already.
So we filed a motion for reconsideration, which after the court did ask FutureWise to respond, which was promising, they denied the motion for reconsideration. So now our motion for discretionary review to the Supreme Court is due by December 15th, and I'm working on that.
Okay.
On this chart, you can see the first part of these levels of service. You can see at the top wastewater treatment, the capacities, stormwater, transportation, law enforcement. And one of the challenges we had from the 2016 FutureWise settlement agreement that led into part of this was not having sufficient rural LOS rather than just urban ones or those within the urban growth areas. So where appropriate, we've now added levels of service for rural support. And certainly wastewater treatment, stormwater, those are only provided in urban areas. So next slide, please. Here are essentially the outside groups that we've tried to create a standard based on communications with the districts, some analysis of national standards, and some ability of trying to interpret those for Spokane County. So you can see a square footage standard for public schools. In fire districts, we have relied on their insurance ratings, which take into account many different things from the people involved to the apparatus, to the distance they have to travel, the size of their areas. We've relied on that analysis to level these out as services. Domestic water, and then for public health, the benchmark we have is simply the contribution from the Board of Commissioners to the health district, and then the health district sets its own standards on how it moves from there.
So question for you.
Yes, sir.
John. And I'm going to the previous slide with regard to law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
You have the rural standard is the county must provide 0.8 law enforcement officers per 1,000 residents. Where did that number come from? And is it sustainable? Because I know that there are a large number of counties in the state that do not provide law enforcement at night or on the weekends because they can't afford it. And so there's no way that they can meet that number. And so I'm concerned that we might be setting a number higher for us than what other counties are already failing to meet.
Very good point. The numbers generally derive from the strength of the existing sworn officer staff and the budgeted totals of those sworn officers. We used that as a benchmark and then looked back and said, what does that come from? The split between urban and rural is one where the urban standard has been set here for some time, and we are within compliance on that, both now and out to 2037. The rural standard was simply backed off to find something that would in fact be a hurdle that would not be debilitating as we grew. So we built in levels of service standards that are that really reflect a minimum level of service, not necessarily a maximum or a aspirational level of service.
So the North Metro area is, I believe, technically considered rural because it's outside the UGA boundary, even though it was developed at urban standards. And so because of that population that exists up there outside of the UGA, but technically in a rural designation, does that create challenges for us in terms of meeting this standard?
If you make it too fine-grained, yes. If you do have to look at what that standard is. We looked at that as an urban area, not, in a sense, not looking at the urban growth area boundary, but reflecting that it is developing in urban densities and in urban form.
And we lost that argument when we included it in the UGA in 2013. And Department of Commerce forced us to take it out because it unnecessarily expanded the UGA, even though the houses were already built. So it was once again a fine example of where reason and logic were not present.
That is true. There is continuing urban style development going on in that area. There are proposals in our shop for 90,000 square foot retail box that's been talked about. So there is a real disconnect between many of these various elements. With the help from Jessica and our legal side, Mark too, we have worked very hard this year, and you've seen some of that in trying to work through the settlement agreement itself, but also is trying to position these documents to better come together in a more organized fashion leading up to that 26 comprehensive plan.
My comment about the lack of reason and logic does not exist within the confines of this administration. It's more at the relation in Olympia.
Point taken.
And Department of Commerce. So I didn't want you to interpret my comment to be critical of you. It's just that there just seems to be a real disconnect between what's on the ground and the ideological approach to land use planning, that just the two just don't seem to be connecting. So I just didn't want to create a landmine for ourselves. That's my opinion.
And as Jessica could talk about it in more lucid legal detail, the court's decision put some of these elements into capital facilities plan that are that make no real sense for planning for growth, but they're lumped in under this category that if it's a public facility, it doesn't have to be explicitly listed. There's any public facility has to be considered in here, and we've taken some of that into account. We have reflected some of what FutureWise has asked for, what Commerce has asked for, and this is an iterative document. We're finally at a place where we can move this forward.
I think Mike has a comment, but I'm gonna have you hold off for just a second because I need to leave. And I just wanna, so he'll continue on that string. On public health, you
Yes.
have $2,250,000. So the 2 million is what we do. 250 is what is for TB, so I would not wanna have it here as part of the total because somebody could look at that and go, you're not funding the health district at what you said.
Okay.
TB is, tuberculosis is a separate funding, that we just reimburse the health district on the cost of what it is.
So 2 million.
So 2 million is what we funded the health district at.
Thank you. We didn't see that distinction before.
So I just wanna make sure that we get that clarity.
I guess I'm a little anxious about even stating a dollar in there. What happens if things change in the future and then you gotta go back and revise a comp plan for a dollar amount?
This would only be in the CFP, not in the comp plan.
Yeah.
And the way, if you think of transportation and the 6-year plans that are done annually, the ongoing 6-year plans, that's really kind of where capital facilities planning needs to go as an annual update. The comp plan part of that is much more robust in not being so time sensitive, but the numbers in here, as you'll see on that next slide, are gonna change every year anyway. So having the number didn't bother us too much. The challenge was, what other standard could we find that links the health district back to the Board of County Commissioners?
I wanna clarify that. It's not exactly accurate. The number that we do have, because the capital facilities plan, remember, is a part of the comprehensive plan, it's an element of it. And the number we have, you're correct, is a level of service standard, which would remain fixed. So while the funding can change, the level of service standards is something we would have to meet. So the reason we chose a number was because you have to, going back to the disconnect between reality and how these work in actuality, you have to choose some measurable standard. And so typically it'd be a physical facility standard, but we didn't really have that for health. So the easiest standard we had, since we didn't own it as the county, was some dollar amount that we could pin, and we went back through basically the historical funding and chose that as a measurable service standard that we thought that the county could continue to meet. So it is important that we lower that to whatever the realistic future standard is. There is no, after a lot of research between Mark, myself, and Jim Amacio, there is no statutory level of service that's mandated for funding the Department of Health. So it would really be whatever the guidance would be from the board. But if we were going to make a change to that level of service standard, we need the guidance today because we have to publish it.
So, I guess since I'm chairing now.
I'll call on you.
Oh, thank you.
Call on Al.
Give me a call.
Go for it.
So what would happen if we just say the county would dedicate $1 per resident in the county? Because right now that'd give us, as a minimum, that'd give us $550,000 that we would have to contribute. We obviously can contribute more, but at least if you're looking for a metric, that's a metric. Or, if you want to say $2 per resident. There's a random metric that, we clearly would fund. We clearly are funding, and if we're not capable of funding it, we got other problems we're dealing with and stuff. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would feel more comfortable personally with that, just from a budgetary standpoint. These are generally M&O contributions, they're not capital.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit concerned if there is a downturn in our financials.
Yeah.
And the board has to make some adjustments. I anticipate you'd be wanting the same to occur at the health district. They're gonna have to make some adjustments as well. And to be tied to a dollar amount that may not be sustainable would give me some pause for recommending to the board.
Your thoughts?
I mean, yours putting it to a population, I like that. I like that idea. Because that's, other metrics are tied to a population, not a dollar amount. So
right,
consistency, I guess, in doing so.
So
$1 per citizen would certainly give us a lower benchmark, but of course the board can opt to do more than that.
We can always opt to do more, and we clearly are doing more, but this is about minimums, not maximums.
Well, even the way this is worded, it says shall contribute at least. So at least blank number of dollars per whether it's $1 or $2 or $1.50, whatever.
Let's
You
go.
can remember where you're comfortable at.
It's a legitimate metric, yeah.
What's gonna look good for our,
We're in a little bit of
is there a number that's too low to where it's like, we're gonna look foolish,
I mean, and I think that's more maybe a budget question. Certainly I don't have this is uncharted territory that health has to be included. That's something that kind of came out of the current Court of Appeals decision. So we did briefly look around and again, for statutory authority for how much is the minimum, and then for other jurisdictions, I don't think we have a ton of information. So obviously, the higher, the less easy it is to challenge, but staying realistic, so we're really in uncharted territory. So whatever you think is best.
About $2. Yeah. How about $2?
All right.
Per resident?
Per resident.
You've got it.
You want to say that as determined by the most recent
Office
census?
of Financial Management.
Okay, yeah. All of our population numbers tie back to the WFM numbers. This slide you can see before you.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Back to the same slide that Commissioner Prince was referring to, it says provisions of at least 9 to 10 pre-booking detention. Is there a definition for what that is?
That's the facility over on Gardner. The one that opened up this past year, or
That's a stabilization facility.
the stabilization facility.
That's for mental health purposes, is that what that's for?
Yes.
Okay.
And that specific metric came out of a negotiated discussion with the FutureWise settlement group during the mediation sessions. So they accepted that as a level of service, and we said, fine, we'll include it.
Perfect, okay, thank you.
The slide that you can see is something that looks very familiar, a typical 6-year plan broken down by the elements on the left side, the funding sources in the second column, and then the amounts out on the 6-year program. These dollars came after work sessions with our budget office and sometimes directly from parks and others. They've laid out that, and then the following slide is our attempt at the 20-year projections. Next slide, please, Ron. Where you can see these costs generally extrapolated out to a 20-year horizon, or now a little bit less than that because it's a 2037 horizon. As you might imagine, adding a 20-year window to a lot of these is very, very difficult. And so the numbers here, we simply took the budgeted amounts and tried to allocate them over a reasonable period of time. 6-year plans are a lot more definitive. They tend to follow our CIP plans. The 20-year horizon that's being asked of us through the settlement agreement is also something that doesn't show up anywhere in statutes or frankly, even in Growth Management Act, other than 20-year population projections. And so there's not a lot of guidance on how to do this. So we did a kind of a best mathematical model we could.
So you'll need to come back and adjust the numbers for public health in the schedule?
Yes.
Okay.
Chair?
Yes.
Under law administration, I wouldn't, it looks like you're just repeating possibly some numbers previously, but that's, I believe, anticipating some sort of a new jail facility in the 23 through 28. And we wouldn't anticipate those to continue on beyond. So it should be substantially lower number. If even enough, if even anything, because we've got other places for detention services and juvenile in there.
Perhaps the prudent thing would be simply delete that line item.
I think so.
Okay. Next slide, please. This is the comprehensive plan summary of capital facilities planning. And the comprehensive plan is where the goals and policies related to CFP work reside. And they're in these 9 categories in our current comprehensive plan. All of these have been edited to be in conformance with the CFP document itself. And so they will come before you as a single comp plan amendment. And as Doug noted before, there's also a track changes version, so you would be able to, the public would be able to see something there. And then the next plan, please, or next slide, please. This is the third element of our group, Spokane County Code 13650, which really defines direct and indirect concurrency. And as you may know from comp planning and even permitting, the concurrency argument is the kind of the foundation of how GMA looks at whether you can effectively grow or make new development happen. And there are generally the direct and indirect versions. What we're recommending is to move some things into direct concurrency that were previously in indirect, excuse me. And you can see those are underlined: fire protection, schools, and stormwater. That allows those to be considered at the time of development. This seems to us a prudent approach to making those happen. And you can do those through various you can sometimes use SEPA mitigation to make those happen. You can do development agreements, you can do other things. But there are things that also come up in pretty much every every comp plan amendment, or are we talking about, have we put these three, have we considered these if we're talking about amending, adding more density to a comprehensive plan?
So to satisfy the indirect with regard to Parks and Recreation, if the developer comes in and let's say they're gonna do a 100-unit residential development and it's determined that they've got to dedicate a block of their land to a park to satisfy concurrency on the parks, would that be satisfied when they did the dedication, or would it be satisfied when the park was developed?
So there's a couple things happening there. So indirect concurrency actually requires us to show that we will have enough parkland in the CFP at the end of the 20-year versus direct concurrency that requires us to go concurrent with the development. So in your scenario, that's more of a direct concurrency analysis, whereas the indirect concurrency we actually do just in the CFP updates. So if someone were to do a comp plan amendment, we would look at whether we have sufficient parkland, and if their comp plan amendment would put us over the LOS for parks, then we could require that they dedicate parkland. And if that dedication is in the CFP as part of the plan, then it satisfies indirect concurrency. So basically we say, oh, there won't be if you add this development, but he's going to dedicate this, and so we're making it subject to that dedication, and because there's a plan, therefore we will be concurrent.
So if there is a jurisdiction within the county that had included a capital facility to accommodate concurrency and growth, they've achieved the growth, but they never built the infrastructure to support it, they are out of compliance with the Growth Management Act. Yes, no?
If it specifically related to parks again, or land?
Well, no, I'm thinking about transportation.
Oh. Transportation is a little bit different animal because it shows up in different areas. There are not transportation levels of service in the CFP. They're in the transportation element itself, and you're all familiar with some of the A through F kind of rankings of capacities on roads. That's handled over on a separate side.
Okay.
And those would be like in a platting process, we would be looking at that with our colleagues at Public Works to say, is there sufficient transportation infrastructure to support this project? And if not, what mitigations need to take place? You need to fund a new traffic signal over here, and you need to build a roundabout over here. So that's already a pretty tightly packaged group.
Okay.
On parks, it's back to that excuse me, either dedication of land if they choose to, or the bigger 2037 standard, which we meet.
Okay, thank you.
The next slide, please. We'll run through some of the comments that we heard and how we've addressed them. These will be in a different kind of matrix that will be posted later on, but we wanted to give you a summary. Most of these first ones come from the FutureWise organization, and they're asking for a more explicit inventory of capital facilities for the schools, the fire, libraries, and general government facilities. We initially disagreed with the idea of libraries and general government facilities even being in here, because it's sort of the question of where do you stop counting a salt shed and how does that relate to development? And so we listed the things that were more directly involved in promoting growth. We also felt that libraries, again, they're necessary things for quality of life. They're necessary for oftentimes residential amenity value, but they're really not something that we control as part of our overall growth. However, in reflecting a likely future challenge to the document if we don't include them, we have found ways of including both library and general government facilities in the document that you will see posted and will be before you on the 13th. Gil and Bruce over in facilities were really helpful in providing some of that information. Second one, forecast of future needs, same thing. That's something we've addressed through the document. The minimum levels of service have been established for those now, for both those two new things that were being asked there. Proposed locations and capacities of expanded or new general government facilities is, in a way, the answer is we're not planning to expand them at this time in any facility that relates to growth and development. So we may or may not satisfy Future Wise's comments there, but we've at least tried. The 6-year plan and the 20-year plan you saw on the previous slides, and then the concurrency analysis has been done and will be incorporated into the document by their request. Next page, please.
So there's no recognition of achieved efficiencies in the Growth Management Act. I mean, if you are more efficient, you get no credit for it. Because all they want to do is see more, regardless of the need. And so in 2000, we had the same size staffing level and the same size campus we have now. We've grown by 150,000 people. We have less staff today and the same campus today that we had 22 years ago. So we're more efficient, but based upon this metric, we would need to be adding more buildings and more staff.
Not technically, you can set a level of service that does not grow, well, staff is not included at all in capital facilities, but the facilities themselves, the physical buildings, you could have a lower, more efficient LOS, especially in light of the work from home, and keep it like that. The issue that we were running into is the Growth Management Act does not actually say we have to inventory general facilities. In fact, the WAC says that those are kind of extra things that we can do, but we won't be punished if we don't. The Court of Appeals decision expanded that and basically says, if it's a physical facility, you have to inventory it. And FutureWise's comments went even further and was like, basically, county, we want to know every garage, every storage shed, every parking facility you own. We want you to have a level of service well, they said bus, but we won that one. We want you to set a level of service. We want you to tell us, you do an inventory, tell us where the future ones are, tell us what capacity each salt shed has. And, and when we talked to Commerce last week, we said, this is not real. Like, this is not a practical thing where someone would inventory all of these and set that, and it doesn't speak to what the Growth Management Act is trying to achieve. And I think while they understood that and they seem to not agree with that far afield FutureWise's interpretation, we're stuck with it for now until we can get the court or the legislature to rein it back into what really is a capital facility necessary for growth and development. So we're trying, working with Gil's folks, like Director Chesney said, to come up with what that square footage is and create these LOSs, but understandably, it's in a very short timeline. So we'll do our best.
And just kind of a note, we had a fairly extensive work session with Commerce last week that was probably more productive than any we've had in the last 2 years. They helped make the point of some of these are pushing the bounds of reality. They're unrealistic. And we left that with a better source that they will be a more honest partner going forward, at least as it relates to this. So it was very productive. Okay. More comments. Some of these are going over kind of redundant pieces. We went over that. Starting with the comment on growth assumptions, the fourth one down. These are from Department of Commerce, and we have reacted to these to essentially either agree with most of them or reflect on, for example, they wanted to use a different set of population numbers that this board had previously adopted in 2016. We were fine with that. We were actually using what we believed were the more accurate numbers, which showed us growing at a faster pace. But by Commerce saying we want you to use the ones that were originally adopted, that moves all of our levels of service in a better position because we're using a smaller population number. So they asked for something that was sort of out of their interest level, but I think they wanted it to be consistent. So we did that. Hello? That was Jerry. No. Okay. The revenue sources, we looked back at that and recognized that they were asking us to consider other kinds of sources. We thought that was a reasonable comment. We did that. Sanitary sewer, they saw a number that showed we would grow out of the county's wastewater treatment plant capacity by the end of the planning period. It wasn't as clear to them that the county's facility has expansion possibilities in modular increments. And more to the point, that all of this is it's all connected by pipes anyway, and the county's facility, if it grew close to capacity before it was expanded, can continue to push that capacity down to the cities where the county owns or has capacity to move that. So once you aggregated those, that concern went away. Stormwater information, again, hard to find sometimes, but they were specifically looking at the West Plains, which we had all been talking about, but didn't show up in here. We were able to get updated information and add it to that. And then the 6 and 20-year analysis again is what you saw on the screen. So we were able to adapt or address rather pretty much all of the comments that came from FutureWise and from Commerce in our final document that's coming before you in 2 weeks. So with that, that is our summary of the CFP group. Again, this will be before you for a public hearing on the 13th. Okay.
That's, on the GMA forecast that you have, are those the low, medium, or high? Which one did you use?
The one in 2016 that the board adopted was, I believe, the medium run.
Okay. I just have a different number for that for 2037. I just wondered.
We did too, but for the purposes of satisfying Commerce's request, we agreed to just use the numbers they wanted to use.
Okay, roger that.
So should I move on?
Yes.
Okay. The last item we have before you is our annual comprehensive plan group. You saw these early on in the year in March, I believe, to initiate them. They are back before you, having gone through the process. Ron, can you bring our slides back up, please? Okay, you can start with the next one following that one. Good, thank you. Here is the overall map showing where they are. You can see there's a group of 3 on the north side, a group of 3 on the West Plains, and then some others kind of scattered in the middle. Next slide, please. This is a summary of each of them, their size ranging from 1.5 acres out to 108 acres. Most of them going to residential from either light industrial or from a lower density to a higher density. One, number 7, was proposed to go to a regional commercial, and the West Plains, 108-acre project number 2 was to a mixed-use category. Next slide, please.
So with regard to the going from light industrial or heavy industrial to residential, we did something similar to this when I was with the city, and we got a lot of pushback from the light industrial users that were already in place, that the minute you put residential property next to them, that they would start getting noise complaints that would interfere with their ability to do business. And so And the development was a Jim Frank development, just north of Lyons on the city. And so what we ended up doing was we created, or we required the developer to record a deed restriction on each one of the parcels, on each one of the that were converted to residential, that restricted their ability to ask for a noise complaint. That the industrial development had a pre-existing right to create noise. Has that come up in any of this conversation, and what kind of reaction do you have about that?
It has come up specifically in relation to amendment number 2. And that type of title notice or deed restriction is already a recommendation in the staff report for those properties.
Oh, okay.
The other interesting thing for number 2 is it's proposing to go from light industrial to mixed use, not purely to residential. And the mixed use component gives it a chance to do urban design in a way that also mitigates noise transfer among properties. For example, you could have more commercial properties or something around the edges if you wanted to that would support something more residential, maybe tucked in the middle somewhere. So there's 2 ways of handling that incident. Interestingly, and we heard from 3 businesses directly, I've got some comments we'll go over here in a minute about those. And at least one of them, when they moved in their light industrial use, there was already some pre-existing residential nearby. And so we've kind of got the cycle circling back now, where some of they went into a neighborhood where there was already some residential, and now there could be some others coming in here. But the idea of a deed restriction or a title notice, plus urban design issues on that mixed use project, we think are an adequate buffer.
Okay, thank you.
The slide you see is the cumulative impacts approach. This is required by the Growth Management Act. As you've seen in the past, when you vote on these, they're voted on in total so that the county can see the full impact of the entire set of amendments, not individually. These are, and naturally they show increases in all of our CFP style impacts. These are all increases that are pretty typical to this kind of use. And more importantly, the increases are all within our levels of service capacity for 2037. So they do not put us out of comply or out of capacity in any way. One of the, good parts that came of this on the water consumption one that we'll talk about here in just a second is there was some risk from District 3, but that risk has been ameliorated. So next slide, please. These 3 amendments are on what we're simply referring to as the Hastings Farwell corridor on the north side. The future Greenstone project is in that mixed use area to the southwest or southeast of the slide. That's Newport Highway going through the middle of it. These are relatively small projects going from low density residential to medium and high density residential. You can see also on this map there have been some prior conversions, those orange and redder areas along the Hastings corridor. There's also the 3 schools up on the corner. And then there's a large piece of DOT right-of-way that's right under that label that says CPA 0122. There has been some discussion with STA and DOT as to whether that may be a transit hub in the future or something else on that land if it is surplused by DOT. All of those generally support higher densities. It's a transit corridor now. It's close to commercial, certainly close to the schools. And so the comments we heard, next slide, please. The comments we heard from these folks were generally about higher density development coming into the neighborhood. It's sort of that continuing evolution that has happened in the past years. And stormwater use. And part of that we were able to check with our colleagues in the stormwater side who determined that there have been some improvements made to make their street flooding better, and there are some on the horizon for the coming year to also ameliorate that concern from them. So that was a really a nice thing to be able to go back and report that there are improvements in the future. There was concern of building heights, was unfounded. The building heights cannot be as high as they were feared, and the school's confirmed capacity for the projects. So that particular issue, again, was dealt with directly. Next slide, please. These are the three proposed amendments on the West Plains. The city of Spokane, the airport is in the light blue. The lilac color is the light industry zoning. I-90 runs through that diagonally. The large amendment number 2 on the top side is the 108 acres from light industrial to mixed use, and then 2 smaller ones from light industrial to low density residential. Next slide, please. This one is amendment 2. It's outlined in the red boundary. You can see it is clearly in the light industrial zone. There are residences to the east, and on the immediate south of this are the 2 industries that were most concerned about this. They both have expansion plans that they want to consider for their lands that grow north into that extended area. Again, this is where both those deed restrictions and others could come into play. And then the motorsports guys are up in that other notch on the west side, and they had the same concern. We build and test off-road vehicles. We have engines. We go out and run them around the property and see if they work. We don't want to have a lot of complaints. Interestingly, one of the groups commissioned a sound study, and they did some sound monitoring on the site, and most of the monitoring for ambient noise was already at a level that the ambient noise was at or higher than the level of projected noise that would come from the property. So they kind of got their argument turned sideways. And there was some concern about, is it even viable to be doing this on this site? One of the things that we talked about last year that we will go forth and do in this coming year is a more comprehensive West Plains analysis, because what happened is at some point in the past, the county's zoning for light industrial allowed for essentially a commercial component, and buried within the commercial component was the ability to do residential. And so you ended up with, and out here we've identified more than a handful of platted single-family residential projects that are still in light industrial zoning. So if you sort of take those and paint them yellow as opposed to lilac, you can start to see that there is a residential mix emerging out here that is becoming really more consistent. The property owner has also talked with some of those neighbors to his immediate east, that light industrial strip that's coming through there, and reports back that at least some of those owners are supporting this because they see the future of residential development out there. They don't see, and haven't for this time that has been zoned light industrial, they haven't seen any development pressure to build business. So with this one, that kind of mixed use idea is there. Next slide, please. This is the kind of the benchmark information about it. We won't leave this up here very long. All of the West Plains amendments are in the city of Spokane's retail water service, sewer service areas. And so when these go into their next stages of plating and design, we will be inviting the city to the table to work on that and to help plan that in a joint planning effort. You can see some of the issues on the side. There are wetlands on the site. Traffic mitigation, not surprising when you're turning an industrial site into a mixed-use site. And as the West Plains is just generally growing, there will be traffic issues out there as that grows and goes forward. STA weighed in on this early on and saw the potential of transit improvements, particularly with the potential densities that could go into this mixed use. Next slide, please.
So for the benefit of when we updated the comp plan and UGA boundary in 2013, the city had requested this neighborhood is actually Thorpe Grandview neighborhood. And they are half in the city, half in the county. And the city had included in its request that this whole area be included in the urban growth boundary. I believe, no, it's further to the south from this. Right. That they wanted to be included in the urban growth boundary, and the county said no, because there was a lack of infrastructure. So that's why this southern boundary of the UGA is kind of configured the way it is and stuff. But I would not be surprised to see the city come in and make a request as part of the UGA expansion to include this in their boundary, predominantly because a lot of the water and sewer that services the West Terrace area comes right through this neighborhood. And the density level doesn't allow them to develop that to the full level that they'd like to see. So just kind of a background for you.
There's a city reservoir at the far south end of this. That's just kind of a little strange piece of land that's out there. Comments on this were fairly extensive from the businesses in particular, and the use, Commissioner French, that you already mentioned, are we creating a nuisance issue? The Planning Commission saw, on the other hand, the chance to add to our residential mix, and in a way with the mixed use element, to have potential, walkable neighborhoods to bring enough development intensity out there that might finally generate the need for markets or groceries or some other commercial components, in the old adage of retail follows rooftops. The city expressed concern about water and sewer, and their comments changed as we went through more positively. The initial, one of the initial analyses that was done suggested there could be as many as 6,000 homes on the property. The developer took that analysis back and said that's not going to be. It's more like 1,500, 1,600. That changed fairly dramatically the water demands and the sewer demands that the city saw in the first one, and threw up their arms and said, "Wait a minute." Our more recent letter from their capital facilities or their engineering group, Catherine Miller used to lead the group, said that the proposed densities will require some improvements, but they didn't see a catastrophic failure. The transportation concerns we talked about, one of which was the idea of that there would be some issue with residents or others wanting to take Thorpe Road over toward 195 to get into the city that way, and the railroad tunnels are kind of a choke point, trying to make that happen. Traffic engineers for the developer pointed out that would be probably the last choice anyone would make to get into there, because if you find a way to get through the tunnels, now you're stuck on 195, you're stuck with the traffic, the ramp signals and all the emergent traffic out there. Whereas it can easily exit through other improvements to the north and up to I-90. And then ongoing stormwater concerns, which we're because of the engineering and public works group bringing that first project on, they're starting to slowly chip away at some of those with S3R3's stormwater management program and the various basins that group has discovered, including, I know they didn't do detailed work on it, but the potential basin south of I-90, stormwater is being addressed now in a reasonable and responsible way. Next slide, please.
And before we move off of CPA 02, as we're sitting here, a SEPA appeal has been filed on that now, so it'll stay on your agenda, but that will run parallel.
We filed the appeal.
Elizabeth Tellison on behalf of Wemco, which is one of the neighboring properties. We anticipated that there would be a CFIP.
Right.
This project is a medium density residential in light industrial. And again, here you can see very clearly the residential platting pattern adjacent to these properties is already set up for home building, single family, low income home building. There's one business on an adjacent parcel, and then to the east is an elementary school. So it really is a pretty consistent emerging residential use. And the next slide, please. This is the last of the West Plains group. Same pattern is existing here. That orange zoned to the south and west of this year's proposed ones was a project that came in last year. You can see that there's also emerging or previously platted residential on two sides of this. To the south of it is the Aspen Grove project. So there's, again, it's an emerging residential area, and we think is consistent with the overall growth and comprehensive plan. And we've got two to finish up. Next slide, please. The first one, oddly enough, was on your table earlier this morning as Jim Amasho was talking about the Beacon Hill TIF. These are projects, turns out, are within that district that are light industrial being proposed for residential. The light industrial classification here, these are sloped lands, is probably not really viable, whereas it's all residential to the south. And the city of Spokane owns the middle parcel, so there's disconnected ownership in this. Their statement was, they'll work out a development agreement probably with the owner to prohibit any development or change of that parcel. I don't think it's announced, but it's sort of a spillway from that reservoir if something happens. So if nothing else, it could be like an open space piece for the two residential parcels on top. Next slide, please. And this is our most challenging one. And you can see it's the red bounded box in the middle. This is heavy industrial. The North Spokane corridor runs just to the east of this. The city of Spokane is to the west. This is south of the future Greenstone project, south of the old Kaiser Works, immediately north of the former R.H. Hansen property. The Northeast PDA is to the south and east of this, its boundary, and had expressed some interest in growing into the area. This is being proposed to go from heavy industrial to commercial, general commercial, with the intention, when it was filed, of being residential. And the question before the Planning Commission was, is it time to be reconsidering our heavy industrial lands and put them into some more productive use because there's an investor that wishes to do so? Or do you hold on to your heavy industrial lands because you can't get them back once you zone them to something else? The Planning Commission requested this not be initiated. The board did initiate it, and so it did go through a full study and came back. And the Planning Commission voted to deny this amendment, and they did so chiefly because the three parcels to the south are the former R.H. Hansen were purchased by a group called Fino Design and Steel, and their intention is to expand from a smaller operation onto these properties. They do specialty steel for bigger projects. So for a stadium project, they might be doing internal stairs or platforms or things like that. They have a fairly extensive portfolio, and they believe that they can grow several hundred workers onto this site over time. The Planning Commission found that a true 11th hour argument. They came in at the public hearing. We didn't know they existed before then, but they found that argument compelling and decided that the value of those jobs was more pressing than the timeliness of the amendment. The developer or the owner of the land proposing the amendment also made their statement to the planning commission saying, we've changed our perspective a little bit. We don't really have a plan right now for it. We don't, residential isn't going to work the way it did in March. And whether that's a reflection of interest rates or supply chain or anything else. So they were saying, we don't really know what we're going to do. It could be commercial, it could be warehouses, it could be multifamily, but we don't have a plan. And I think my interpretation is the planning commission saw that as, okay, well, maybe this just isn't ripe. And rather than grant the amendment and perhaps put the future jobs at risk, we would take it off the table and let it sit for a year or so until something more came back. So, next slide, please. These are the basics. Again, this is an area, and our CEO helped on this. There are 4 water districts that bound this thing, and through Scott's help with the city, the idea was, well, sit down or get on the phone and somebody pick one. And ultimately, District 8 stepped up to send a commitment of water. Turns out that's not necessary from the Planning Commission's denial, but it was a good process to see that happen, because it also brought in a bigger discussion of how maybe water purveyors could do some trading in this area for future development. Next slide, please. So the comments here were the ones we've pretty much gone over before. The concern of losing heavy industrial land, the new property owner to the south, east-west transportation is missing. It would be the Holland Avenue right-of-way would have to be completed. And originally the city of Spokane was concerned over water. There was an assumption that it would be city served, and they were not committing to that, but then once District 8 stepped in, that concern went away. So next slide, please. And this is simply another summary of those cumulative impacts, exactly the same as before. So thank you for your attention. I'm happy to take any other questions on that. As we said, the Planning Commission is recommending approval of all but amendment number 7. They voted to deny that.
Okay.
So what the board will see is on December 6th, you'll see on your consent agenda, the receipt and consideration of the Planning Commission's recommendations and findings of fact. And then on the 13th, you'll have the CWPPs, the CFP, the Spokane County Code 13650 and Chapter 7 in that public hearing. And then the CPAs, the 8 of those would be in the public meeting that would happen afterwards. And so your options on the 13th will be to approve or continue all the CWPP, CFP, CPAs, and Chapter 7 and 13650. And then if you approve all of those, then you can approve, deny, or continue any of the 8 CPAs. But if for any reason the CFP or SCC 13650 or the CWPPs, you choose to continue those because of public comment or anything else, then you would have to do the same for the CPAs.
But you indicated that the one there at Garden Springs had there was an appeal filed on that, so
there has been
how does the appeal?
Yeah, there has been a SEPA appeal that can run concurrent. So that's the O2. So if you chose to approve it, the SEPA would just continue alongside. But if for some reason we lost the SEPA appeal, then we would have to take action to roll that back, basically. It kind of depends on the outcome.
So will we get briefed on the appeal before the hearing?
They've held it before. The SEPA appeal goes in front of the in front of the hearing examiner. And so it kind of, I'm not sure that he'll hear it beforehand. So it may be that you make your decision first and then he makes his decision. We'll come back before you to let you know what the decision is. And it may, if we lost the SEPA appeal, then you would have to repeal the CPA O2.
But if the hearing examiner rules on the appeal and the appellant doesn't agree with the hearing examiner's ruling, they then can appeal it to the Board of County Commissioners or Superior Court.
It goes to Superior Court, but I'll have to look that up. So that could be another twist.
Yeah, if you could confirm that for me, because that would influence my perspective on how to deal with that.
Yes, I will do that.
Different kind of process if it comes back to us and we've already approved the CPA or the CP, CPA. Then does that then cloud our judgment in terms of hearing the appeal if it comes back to us too?
Yeah, the appearance of fairness doctrine.
Appearance, fairness,
Yeah.
act.
I will definitely look into all that. Those are
Okay.
excellent questions.
Yeah, so that might affect the timing of it. Superior Court concerns or questions you have?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Simmons.
Just a quick question. That SEPA appeal is, they're appealing the county's SEPA determination?
Correct.
Yeah.
When these are adopted, are they adopted in one motion, or since some of, there's one that's recommended to not be adopted, the others to be adopted. Does that one that's not being adopted have to be taken separately? If that's the way, if we choose to agree with them and not adopt that, do we take that on its own to vote that down? Vote the others as a block, as a yes? Or is it one motion to accept as recommended by the planning?
It would probably be clearest if the CWPPs, the CFP, Chapter 7 and 13650, that'll all be one motion because you have to either accept all those together or deny them all. And then the CPAs, it's clearer for the record because they can be challenged individually if you pass them each individually. So we'll have motions prepared for you.
All right, sounds good.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Simmons, I guess we are back to you.
Well, I think, given the time, we've got a couple miscellaneous that we could do this afternoon.
Okay.
If we're good for now.
Same with you?
I'm good. Yeah, I don't have anything for us.
Okay.
Are we coming back this afternoon? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're starting at 2.
Okay, for a good time.
Can't wait.
As a part of the 2B today on broadband update, is that are we gonna be discussing the broadband PDA in that? Okay, all right.
Okay, so it is 12:36 and we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Back at 2.